Delina Mai Kako, welcome to Keep It Aloha. We're back with another episode with the one and only Dr. Keanu Sai. Support for this podcast comes from Texaco in Hawaii, which features 58 convenient locations across the state. Fueling up at Texaco is fast and easy when you use the Texaco mobile app to pay at the pump. The Texaco mobile app is a contactless way to pay for fuel so you can get in and out of the gas station quickly. Fuel your car and fuel yourself. Pick up your favorite local snacks and ice cold drinks at your neighborhood Texaco today. Texaco at Techron, driving performance. I guess I don't really need an intro because we already had an episode with a whole intro for you, your bio, everything. So if you're here, you're probably here because you saw part 1. And I wasn't expecting a part 2 so soon, but I'm happy that it happened because your episode has caused a lot of buzz and good buzz besides the 1%ers of the some people that get offended by anything they see on the internet. But so how has it been since we last talked? Have you heard, I guess, comments from other people? Because I know you're off social media. So what is it like on your side?
No, people have been coming up to me and say, I saw the podcast. I said, hey, right on. And they thanked me, you know. And one said, I didn't know that side of you, but I've been following your work. And I said, yeah, that's the story behind the story.
Yeah. And that's what's cool about this is we get to see other sides of people that we have known for a long time. Yeah. So on the social media side, I mean, some people are saying it's the best episode, super educational.
Right on.
Some of the clips, like when you're talking about like the would Japan have invaded Hawaii? What is are we American or are we Hawaiian? Stuff like that. When it reaches outside of the Hawaii demographic, you go to like people that are not from here and it's the same ignorant comments like, oh no, China would have taken it, or look at these people, so ignorant, they don't even know what's going on. So
and the point on that is, let's say China did do it back in 1893. They would come under the same rules of international law that the United States came under. So really nothing changes.
Yeah.
It is the law. But I think what people are taken aback by is the fact that they didn't know this history, right? Well, it was intentional. Denationalization wiped the national consciousness of the Hawaiian Kingdom in the minds of the population. And it started off with the school children, which is my tutu's generation. That's why we didn't know. Not because of America, being strong. Well, if they were so strong, why did they take steps in the early 1900s to actually conceal the illegality?
There has to be some sort of reason, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm happy you're back because we can talk about the last episode, some of the reactions. I think one thing that would be good to understand, and for me and the audience to know, would be, what is international law? What do you mean when you say international law?
Sure. So the term international law is literally the law between nations. So between, not intra-national law or within, right? So international law is a law between sovereign and independent states. They are the primary subjects of international law. And international law can be what is called customary international law, meaning it's a recognized practice by all the states, so they don't have to put it in a treaty form. An example would be diplomatic immunity, right? For an ambassador in the territory of another country. That is an accepted rule of international law, so it would be considered customary. It has since been codified exactly the realm of the immunity, right? So it could be codified. Now, codification of customary international law is when states get together and they form a treaty. And that treaty merely reiterates what customary international law is, right? So an example, in 1893, the customary international law is when one country overthrows the government of another country, you have to administer the laws of the occupied state. And that was recognized since the mid-1800s, but it was customary, right? And America recognized that in all its wars since its inception. Now, in 1899, the United States and other countries got together in The Hague, in the Netherlands, the city of Den Haag, The Hague, and they put together Hague Convention number 3, I believe at that time, right? And in there, they codified the laws of occupation. So now instead of saying, you have the duty to administer the laws of the occupied state, now you just say Article 43. So that's an example of codification.
Okay.
Right? Then they revised or superseded the 1899 Hague Convention in 1907. And they adjusted it even more. But Hague Convention number 4 now regulates the laws of war and occupation. Article 43 is still there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. And then, so we also had La Ho'iho'i'ea on July 31st. It's been a couple weeks since then. You sent a letter to General Hara, and you're supposed to get an answer before that or by then. And then, so what is the update since then?
Okay, so before I get into that particular question, I want to just add one more thing with international law, because it's going to dovetail into why we did what we did in sending Major General Hara the letter, right? So enforcement of international law is done by governments of states or independent states. They're the ones who enforce international law, and it's recognized as such, right? So primary responsibility for enforcing international law would be the government of a country. Okay. Now, if that government is overthrown, then it will be replaced by a military government to administer the laws of the occupied state. So it would be that government of an occupied state that would have to enforce international law. So it doesn't just go into limbo when a government is overthrown. You have to step in to temporarily maintain the status quo and administer the laws of the occupied state until you get a treaty of peace where the occupation will come to an end. Then the governments would switch from military government to the restored government of the occupied state, and the occupation ends.
So we never had a military government established?
So under the rules of international law, customary at that time in 1893, the United States Marines that overthrew the Hawaiian government was responsible for seizing control of the government that was overthrown and serve in the absence of Lili'uokalani as the executive. And they would be what is called a military governor. But everyone in that civilian government would remain in place, right? So a military government is a misnomer. It's not that that all positions are filled by military people. No, military is combat arms, combat support arms. They're not administrators. So what happens is the highest ranking person, called the theater commander, is the one to become that military governor. So that's what General MacArthur was in 1945 when Japan surrendered. He merely replaced the head of that government, the prime minister, right? Of Japan. But everyone in the Japanese civilian government stayed in place to continue to administer the laws of the occupied state. And that eventually came to an end in 1952 when the Treaty of Peace came into effect.
And then it's restored. Their government is
exactly. Then it goes back to the Japanese government. Okay. So you just don't have this thing go into limbo because there are so many private rights and aspects involved in a country, in any country, where its government gets militarily overthrown by another government or the troops of another government. So they were supposed to have done that in 1893, January 17th, according to their rules and international rules, right? But they didn't. They used the insurgents to stay in power that they put in place. Because what was in the minds of people in Congress was Pearl Harbor. And they were buying time, right? Which eventually led to 1898, the United States Congress passes a law during the Spanish-American War purporting to have annexed Hawaii, right? Called a Joint Resolution of Annexation. So a joint resolution is a law that is agreed upon jointly between the Senate and the House of Representatives. And then President McKinley signed that into law on July 7, 1898. The problem is the United States could no more annex Hawaii by passing a law in 1898, which is a country. Then the United States today can pass a law, a joint resolution annexing Canada. It has no effect beyond the borders of the United States. And that goes to what is called sovereignty and independence, right? So because the Hawaiian Kingdom still had sovereignty, even though its government was overthrown, The only way that you could have acquired the Hawaiian Kingdom, you need a treaty. We don't have a treaty.
And we never did. It was never concocted. Like, they just totally skipped over all of that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that was intentional.
Oh, yeah. Now, what's mind-blowing is that members of Congress and the Senate, in the minutes that are taking place in the debates that are going on the so-called Joint Resolution of Annexation, Senator Pettigrew came up, flat out said, you cannot annex a foreign country by passing a law. You need a treaty. Our laws have no effect beyond our borders. So they all understood it. And then one said, well, we'll deal with it later because this is a military necessity because we're fighting the Spanish. Mm-hmm. And the Spanish were not only in the Caribbean, Puerto Rico and Cuba, they're also in the Pacific, Guam and the Philippines. Mm-hmm. And the U.S. Navy was using Hawaii as a naval port to recall their ships on the way to the Philippines for the war. Mm-hmm. Through all of that, it's just an American law limited to U.S. territory, right? So Hawaii was not annexed. Now, 2 years later, United States Congress passes a law changing the name of the government of the Hawaiian Kingdom to the territory of Hawaii. Still an American law passed by Congress. Then in 1921, Hawaiian Homes Act was enacted by Congress as a part of the Organic Act of 1900. Still an American law. And here they identify Native Hawaiians through blood quantum for the first time. Mm-hmm. First time. You got to be 50%.
And blood quantum was never a thing back then.
No, that's an American creation. And then in 1959, the Statehood Act. United States Congress changed the name of the territory into the state of Hawaii. The problem is, the common thread, they're all American laws. And the Hawaiian Kingdom still has its sovereignty. So in the early 1900s, they began a policy of denationalization, meaning destroying the national consciousness of the Hawaiian Kingdom in the minds of school children. And that was a formal policy that came about in 1906, right? That's my tutu's generation. And all she was taught was American history and speak English.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't Kamehameha created off of like this other school, like this Kaniela Ing talked about it once, that it's like some sort of Christian white school or something. Do you know which one it is? No. I should have looked it up.
No, Bernice Po'oyes called for the creation of the Kamehameha schools.
No, it was like inspired by some, I don't know, maybe somebody can look it up after if they're reading this, but yeah, maybe during our break I'll try to look up the clip and see what you think about that one.
Sure.
Yeah. But okay, yeah, this is super interesting, and this is why you're back for another part 2. I usually don't have people come back too often, but this was definitely necessary. And also, it's funny, we were on the same flight here. Forgot to mention that, yeah, because I was just in Hilo to visit my family, and then I was wondering, I'll probably see you at the airport because I know the time you're coming to this studio. So yeah, it's so funny that we ran into each other. And I also ran into one of your friends that knows my stepdad, Kalani Mota, I think.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So
I was sitting next to him on the flight.
Exactly. Yeah. So I just met him because he said he watches the podcast. So shout out Kalani if you're watching this. And he was saying that he was watching your stuff and all that stuff, and that you were brother-in-law with Billy Kinoy, yeah?
Right.
Mayor Billy Kinoy.
Yeah.
And he was saying, try ask him what Billy thought of all the stuff that you're doing. So I wanted to get that out before I forget later on this podcast.
Yeah, no. So, and that's what I was sharing with Kalani on the flight, that American law being imposed in an occupied state, which includes statehood law, county ordinances, it actually comes under what is called the war crime of usurpation of sovereignty, where one country is usurping the sovereignty of another country during occupation. So since World War I, the United States concluded, along with the Allied powers that beat Germany and Bulgaria and Austria in the First World War, they said that was a war crime because Kingdom of Serbia was being subjected to German laws being imposed in its territory. So it's actually a war crime. But when you're coming to this reality, I had to be very careful on how I say things, because everybody here are committing war crimes, right? Everybody. We're all under American.
Here as in America.
Here in the Hawaiian Kingdom.
In the Hawaiian Kingdom, okay.
Yeah, because this is in America.
Okay.
But since 1898, America has been imposing its laws and administrative measures where we're all caught in it. It's like a web, right? So I have to be very careful how we came out with war crimes and how we explain it. So I remember my wife would always tell me, stop saying that. Say Whiskey Charlie, you know.
Some code, yeah, use some acronyms.
So I always made sure that Billy didn't know as much as I knew.
Was that so that you couldn't like indict him on any...
I'm protecting him.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And everyone else, you know, so I tried to say, well, this is what we're teaching at the university. What we're teaching at the university is international law. And it leads to these issues. But it was all timing, right? And that's why when I approach things, I have to make sure that I'm not here to exacerbate the problem. I'm here to bring a solution and remedial prescription to the problem. But you need to have a proper diagnosis. So when you kind of tell somebody that your name is not Kamako, actually I got your birth certificate, it's Mary, right? That's a shock for you.
Yeah.
Right? So
how did you see my birth certificate? How did you know?
Pure analogy. But it's that shock, like, wait a minute, you're telling me we're not American? You know? It's that initial reaction, right? So I'm mindful of that. I've always been. Because my kuleana that I shared in the last episode, it's clear for me. I know what I have to do. And also, I get hit. So there's a difference between people who make noise and matters of substance, right? So back in the late 90s, I was part of a company called Perfect Title Company that was exposing that all land titles in Hawaii are defective because the notaries, right? The notaries who notarized a deed was not legal. They were not legal. And it starts off with the notaries of 1893 from the overthrow. According to President Cleveland, these are insurgents and was asking the Queen for amnesty to be granted to them. She agreed once she gets restored, she'll grant amnesty. She wasn't restored. That means they're still insurgents. And they're still performing government functions like being a notary. So all land titles stopped in 1893. So what ended up happening is we were explaining to people through Perfect Title Company, a title report will show the evidence of a defect in title, but you have protection, title insurance. So title insurance, one of the covered risks is a defective notary, right? So we were providing them the evidence for them to file claims with the title insurance company and then look into it and determine whether or not 1893 notaries were defective. Well, the records already can prove that. President Cleveland concluded that in his report to the Congress, right? So you have this knee-jerk reaction by the title companies in Hawaii, led by Title Guarantee. Okay? John Jabinski, the attorney for Title Guarantee, led a media attack against us. Oh, it was pretty brutal.
When was this?
I believe 1997.
Oh, okay, wow.
1997. And our office was on the corner of Merchant and Richard Street, just a hop, skip, and a jump from Title Guarantee, right? Because what we basically were showing that not just titles were defective, all mortgages were void. And title insurance covers the debt owed to the bank by those who borrowed the money, but also bought the title insurance. So what ends up happening is we get raided by the White Collar Crime Unit, Honolulu Police Department, and myself and my partner, Don Lewis, and our secretary, we get arrested for racketeering, tax evasion, and theft. Made up. Completely made up, right? And that's what happens when you become an existential threat to the system. And they reacted. They didn't respond, they reacted, which means you just proved my point, because if it was frivolous, you have nothing to worry about.
So they're just trying to find anything that they could or make up stuff to, like, I don't know, put you behind bars or whatever to shut you up.
Well, they couldn't get anything on racketeering, right? So they get an indictment against me and my partner, Perfect Title Company, for attempted theft of land, a Class B felony, up to 10 years in prison. They were claiming that we were doing title reports and fixing people's title under Hawaiian law, considered theft. It's like, what? Made up. But when I came to the sentencing, because naturally I get convicted by a jury that doesn't even understand what's going on, the judge is apologizing to me, Judge Sandra Sims. And she says, I know what you're doing, Dr. Sai. And this court, nor the state of Hawaii, will prevent you from going to the Netherlands, to the Permanent Court of Arbitration, because our case was just about to begin. So she sentenced me to 5 years probation, because she said she had to, because the jury convicted me. But she apologized to me. So that experience that I have personally, it made me realize I got to watch out for my family. I got to look behind my back. So I'm not going to put my brother-in-law and everyone else in that type of a situation. Sometimes it's best we just talk regular stuff.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, kind of compartmentalize that
Exactly.
those parts of your life.
So I come at it from a personal and experience standpoint. But it still does not take away the fact is my kuleana that I chose, or should I say I was chosen for it. I got to fix this problem with the people that I work with. So that was important. Yeah.
Okay.
And it still is that important today. But it now has gotten to that point where information is out. This is not how it was in 1997 when people were clueless. Now when you say Hawaii is occupied, it's almost like an accepted fact, right? When you say war crimes, people, yeah, I heard. It's not like, what? It has gotten to that point because of education. Responsible education. And we're driving that at the university system, right? Law review articles, peer review articles, publications, right? Attending conferences, all academic, right? So we are at that point. So it got to where we are now, which is the last podcast on Major General Hara, right?
Yeah. And let me just add, a lot of the comments I saw through the social media clips was like, mind blown, or like I took his class and I knew nothing about this. A lot of it was just like one was like a 3-minute clip, and there's like I learned more in 3 to 4 minutes than I did in my whole entire time at school. So just to go to your point, where it was a lack of education as well on the part of the state government, whatever, the schools. So it's just things that we're never taught of. The news doesn't share these things. So that's why platforms like this is kind of the only way you can reach the mass audience. So, yeah.
No, exactly. Because not everybody can go to college and take my class or take classes from others that teach something similar. Right?
Everybody can go on social media and watch this, though.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah.
You know, so the state of Hawaii, as a governing body, has no legal authority. None, because it was created by the Statehood Act of 1959. So if American laws cannot be applied outside of its territory, and to then still apply it outside of its territory in occupied territory, that's a war crime called usurpation of sovereignty, like I said, right? So the existence of the state of Hawaii is based on a war crime of usurpation of sovereignty. But that governmental infrastructure is the governmental infrastructure from the Hawaiian Kingdom, 1893. All that was changed in 1893 was replacing the Queen and her cabinet and Marshal Charles Wilson of the police force with Sanford Dole and his cronies. That's all, right? Everyone else was told to stay in place in the government and swear allegiance, sign an oath of allegiance to the new regime, who were being protected by U.S. Marines. And that's what prompted the song Kaulana Napua, Mele Aloha Aina, the Patriot song, right? Where they refused to sign the paper of the enemy with its sin of annexation and loss of civil rights. And what I just stated there was one of the lyrics in that song, which plays at Safeway over the speakers, and nobody has any clue what's actually being said, right? But that was a song of defiance. Well, the Royal Hawaiian Band eventually lost their jobs, and they had to survive. So then these insurgents were weeding out loyalists within the governmental infrastructure. So by 1898, they've already weeded them all out. And then the United States took it over, calling it the Territory of Hawaii. And then they changed the name to the State of Hawaii. So that governmental infrastructure is the Hawaiian Kingdom's infrastructure. Clear. Yeah.
Okay. So what is where are we at now with General Hara and post La Ho'iho'ia?
So under international law, the occupant of the occupier, right? So would it be federal or state government and county? Which one is responsible to transform into a military government under American rules to administer the laws of the occupied state? And that would be the state of Hawaii. And in the 1907 Hague regulations that regulates the law of occupation, Article 42, which precedes Article 43, which is the mandate to administer the laws, there's a prerequisite in Article 42. It says that territory is occupied when it comes under the effective control of the occupier. Because when you have effective control is when you can enforce laws. That's what triggers Article 43. Mm-hmm. So the state of Hawaii is in effective control of over 10,000 square miles of these islands. The federal government and the U.S. troops under Indo-Pacific Command are only in control of less than 500 square miles. So they, by definition, according to Article 42, they don't have that duty as an occupant. The state of Hawaii does. So since the state of Hawaii, or the Statehood Act of 1959, has been rendered unlawful and void, that means everybody in the state of Hawaii, as far as government officials, have no authority because it all derives from American law, which is a war crime, right? What is left standing, though, is the Department of Defense, the Hawaii National Guard, Army and Air, because their rank and their status does not derive from the Statehood Act. It derives as being members of the United States military. Okay, so that's why they're the only entity that still has any authority in Hawaii as an occupied state. So then it falls on Major General Hara as the adjutant general in charge. He's the most senior commander in occupied territory, just like if he was in Afghanistan or Iraq. He's the one responsible, according to Army regulations, to transform the state of Hawaii into military government. And Army regulations cover the whole thing. And it tells you exactly how to transition.
And do they not do this because they don't take you seriously? Like, they don't think you're serious? Like, I'm actually going to charge you with war crimes. I'm going to do this if you guys don't do this.
Well, again, it's the approach, right? So the definition of power in political science is the ability to get somebody to do something they wouldn't normally do. And typical wielding of power is economic power, political power, or last resort, military power. And that's how you get somebody to do something they wouldn't normally do. We don't have that luxury. We don't have political power. We don't have economic power. We don't have military power. All we have is the power of the law, rule of law, lawfare. So I'm going to apply lawfare in situations where we can get people to do something they wouldn't normally do, but it's how you approach it. So I had a meeting with Major General Hara on April 13th, 2023 at the Naniloa Hotel.
And that's inside of the thing you sent me.
Right? And in that meeting, I laid it all out with him because he and I knew each other. He was a young lieutenant when I was a captain, right? So I explained everything to him. I had the paperwork. Here it is. I said, Ken, do you see that this is your duty under Army regulations? And he just nods because he couldn't deny it. It's like I'm showing him, this is a watch.
No, it's not a watch.
Yeah, exactly.
You're wrong. Hey, you'd be surprised. Some people on social media is like that. So then I told him, if you fail to perform this duty, right, under Uniform Code of Military Justice, that is an offense. It's also willful disobedience of a regulation. That's also an offense. You could face up to 2 years in prison, Uniform Code of Military Justice. But those combined, failure to abide by regulation, Army regulation, and failure to perform your duty is considered a war crime by omission. So it's not that you committed the war crime.
You did not stop the imposition of American laws when you didn't transform the state of Hawaii into a military government. So that would be a war crime by omission, not commission, right? Like you're committing the act. And he nodded, and I said, and I'll hold you accountable, because I'm the head of the Royal Commission of Inquiry, and our mandate is to investigate war crimes and gather information and evidence so that people get prosecuted when that time comes, because there's no statute of limitation for war crimes. Germany in 2022 prosecuted a 97-year-old woman for Nazi war crimes. Crazy. Wow. So this is not something that people should play around with. Oh, this is for real. Military knows that, right? But then I told Ken, don't take my word for it. I'm going to recommend to you that you task your JAG officer, Lieutenant Colonel Phelps, okay, who's a Maui prosecutor, but he also served as a JAG officer in the 25th Infantry Division. You get him to refute all this information. If he can provide you clear evidence, irrefutable evidence, the Hawaiian Kingdom does not exist, and this is the state of Hawaii, and it's a lawful state of Hawaii, then you don't have a duty. You're good. But if he can, it's going to trigger your duty automatically. And he nodded. Yeah. So I gave him time to do that. Within 3 weeks, I was told, because we were communicating through an interlocutor, a middleman, that nobody knows I'm putting pressure on him. No, I'm giving him the distance. Do your thing, do your due diligence on your own. Use your chain of command. That's how it's supposed to work. And I was told by the interlocutor that he told him to tell me that his JAG is making strides, but he needs more time. Not a problem. I want people to walk in eyes wide open, not walking in blind faith, And I'm putting it and couching it within, just do your job. That's the irony of all of this. Nobody's asking you to do a backward flip. No, this is called do your job. Yeah. Right?
Yeah, do what you can now. You don't have to learn a new skill, nothing, just
maximize your kuleana. Just be better at what you do. So on July 27th, Hara admitted to our interlocutor in a meeting, Hawaii's occupied, and that his JAG could not refute the information.
Wait, he admitted it on what, like video, word, paper?
In a meeting with the interlocutor. Okay, so as soon as I heard that, I put it in writing, right? It's like putting it contemporaneous notes, and I sent it to him. He didn't deny it. And why would your interlocutor lie? And we're communicating through him all these months, right? And that's when we're supposed to have gotten together to start working on a plan of transition. And then 1 week later, the Maui fires broke out, and that he was then deployed to Lahaina. And I kind of let things, okay, let's go back, focus on this disaster, and I just let things go. So then I spoke with Archie Kalepa, right? He's a waterman. Yep. Because actually I was talking to Brian Keolana on something that he and I were working on, me and Brian. And Brian says, hey, Keanu, Archie wants to talk to you. Oh, okay. Hey, so Archie goes, hey, Keanu, you may not know me, but me and my family, we know you. And we support your work. And one of my good friends who was Professor Kanalu Young at Hawaiian Studies, and he was on my doctoral committee. That was Archie's cousin. I didn't know that. Oh, wow. Yeah, so wow.
Small world, smaller island.
So Archie tells me, or asks, if I would be willing to come up for the Lahaina March. And I said, sure, no problem. So he booked me a flight, took care of hotel stay. So so Brian and I flew in, right? We got picked up and we're taken to Archie's place, just like right aside from where the burning took place. It was like his house and the houses around him were spared, right? So as I get out of the van, I see Ken Hara in the garage. I'm like, what is Ken doing here? So I went up to him. I said, hey, how you doing, Ken? Hey, Keanu. I said, how you know Archie? Oh, we worked together a lot because of the Lahaina fire and aid and restoration. I said, oh, right on, right on. So then he tells me, so I ask him, how's your JAG, Lieutenant Colonel Phelps? And he tells me, Keanu, he says, you dance circles around him. I said, he can't refute the information. In my mind, I'm saying, he's not dancing circles. He can't refute it, right? And then he tells me, I'm going to retire. And I smiled. No, you're not. Because to retire would be willful dereliction of a duty. It's like you're in Baghdad and you have to disarm an IED because it's close to a playground in Baghdad. And you're going to say, as the officer in charge, I'm not going to deal with it because I'm leaving Iraq in 2 weeks. No, your duty is what you have then. And if you don't perform it, Army says that's willful dereliction of duty. And that's an offense under the...
He's just trying to pass it on to somebody else.
I don't know what he was thinking, right? So that's when I knew, okay, we're going to have to mount a pressure attack, right?
Yeah, go for the takedown.
No, actually,
double leg.
See, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the basketball analogy, full court press.
Oh, okay. Nice.
So that full court press was going to begin when I got invited by Tamara Paulton, who's a council member for Maui County Council. She asked me if I could do an update on Hawaii, status of Hawaii under international law to her committee. In there, it's the first time I made it public on HARA's responsibility and duty. Well, they all saw it, right? And also Hawaii being an occupied state and war crimes being committed. And then that led to a letter written by 37 police officers to Major General Hara, calling upon him to perform his duty of transitioning the state of Hawaii into military government because police officers can be held liable for enforcing American law. So you see how the conversation is being directed onto the issue at hand. And people who signed off on that letter included a former chief of police, assistant chiefs, retired, captains, lieutenants, active duty lieutenants, active duty sergeants, other sergeants retired, detectives, and patrolmen. Very impressive, the list, right? They would not sign something like that if it was frivolous. And also in that letter, they also acknowledged the Council of Regency, which I'm a part of, as being a legitimate government. And that when the occupation comes to an end, the legislature will then select a Council of Regency on their own by ballot under Hawaiian law. But for now, the Council of Regency is allowed to continue under Hawaiian constitutional law and what is called the doctrine of necessity. Right? But it shows that police officers see that. Do you think they would do that to a sovereignty group? They have problems with sovereignty activists with driver's licenses. So they did their due diligence and were confident to put their name on it. And that I thank them for. And they say they support our plan to bring compliance, right? So it got to a point where, I'm going to put a date on Major General Hara, July 31st, 1200 hours, military for 12 noon. So you have until that time, even though you announced your retirement, you have until that time to delegate full authority to your deputy, General Logan, Brigadier General Stephen Logan, so he can establish a military government by 12 noon. And if you don't, you be the subject of a war criminal report that we published on the Royal Commission of Inquiry, its website. And that's what I told him at our meeting on April 11th. So it's not like he's getting blindsided here, right? He walked in eyes wide open. Now, that day came, it didn't happen.
They didn't contact you at all?
No. And I'm not asking for them to be contacted. I'm just saying follow your rules. We don't need to plan this. This is Army regulations. You are the American Army right now. You're not the Hawaiian Kingdom Army, right? Follow the rules. So on Monday, when the war criminal report was published, then I sent a letter on that day to General Logan. And I said, General Logan, this is what you need to do, and you have 1 week. And I carbon copied also all the senior officers of the 29th Infantry Brigade. And I explained, you do not perform your duty and you follow the same course as Major General Hara. Then it goes to the next in command, the commander of the 29th Infantry Brigade. So that's the order of battle, the battalions, and how it's set up within the brigade called the 29th. And if he fails after 1 week, then it goes to the next, then the next, until it goes through the entire chain of command of the Army National Guard, from the highest ranking officer to the buck private. And somebody is going to see the writing on the wall. And I recommend it to them. First, all you need to do is, because this is what I found out as well, why Howard didn't do it. The Attorney General and Lopez told Major General Hara and Brigadier General Logan, ignore me. Okay, wait, ignore. How does a legal person explain that type of an advice? Aren't you supposed to provide an evidential basis to ignore, not just ignore it? Especially if you will come up with a war crime, right? So what I told General Logan, as I told Major General Hara, demand to get a legal opinion from the Attorney General to qualify her statement to ignore me. And if you can't get that legal opinion that says the state of Hawaii is lawful under international law, if you don't get it, then you perform your duty. Until then, demand it. So every commander has been notified. That's what you got to do. Put her on the hot seat. Demand it. And if not, you're a war criminal. So you got a choice. Demand or become.
So these people probably don't like you, right? Like when General Hara sees you, he's probably just like, oh, this guy again.
No, actually, when I saw him at Archie Kalepis, he was fine.
He's cool.
He had a demeanor on that was fine. Because see, why would you be angry with me in just when I'm talking about your rules? That's
what I noticed from your last episode and talking with you. It's hard to argue with you. Yeah. It's hard to disagree with a lot of the things you say because it's backed by so much sources, and it's like trying to argue with a scientist that this thing that has been studied that has like factual evidence is incorrect.
Right.
So, it's funny when I see some of the pushback because I'm just like, he's just presenting you with the facts. He's looking outside and saying, there's rain, it's raining.
Right.
How can you tell me it is not raining? It's obviously raining, you know?
No, and I've never gotten into an argument with anybody.
Well, I think people are afraid.
It's always behind my back.
Yeah.
But, at every opportunity, I get people to try to argue against it. So like my doctoral committee. So my members of the doctoral committee for PhD, specializing in international relations and law, I had committee members who had that background. One was from the University of London Law School, State Sovereignty and International Law, Professor Matthew Craven. I had the Dean of the Law School, Aviam Soifer. His master's in law was constitutional law. U.S. constitutional law. I had 3 poli-sci professors, right? Law and judicial behavior, public law, and sovereignty. And I also had John Osorio on my doctoral committee because Kanalu passed away, right? So I asked John if he could replace Kanalu. So he did. None of them could refute my dissertation because what happens when you defend your dissertation is that you don't argue it. You defend it. And the role of the committee is to poke holes in it. And if they can find holes, you don't get your PhD and you got to revamp it, right? None of them refuted anything. If anything, the last person to sign off on my doctoral committee was Aviam Soifer, the Dean of the Law School. And I'm at his office and I know what he's thinking because if he signs off on it, it implies UH Law School is illegal because you're teaching American law. It should be Hawaiian Kingdom law. And you're creating American attorneys when it should be Hawaiian attorneys under Hawaiian law. That's the blowback here. It's a zero-sum game here, right? And he's going over and I said, Avi, I addressed everything. Can you sign it? Sign it. Thank you very much because it's running late. I took it straight up to grad division because I was running. It would have been late if it came a day later. But one thing that John Osorio told me in my defense, I met with him at his office. I said, John, so any concerns that you have regarding my dissertation before I defend? He goes, no. He tells me, Keanu, everything here just undermines everything we teach at UH. I say, I know. But my intent was not to discredit. My intent was to properly defend my dissertation so I can get my PhD.
Well, so what are they teaching that you're undermining that he thinks?
So they teach, and you hear this sometimes, that Hawaii was colonized by the United States. Okay, no, it wasn't. was occupied. And it's not semantics. To confuse occupation with colonization is like confusing adoption with kidnapping, right? Or forced adoption, but adoption nevertheless. So when you're a country, a recognized independent state under international law, the rule says that you have sovereignty over your territory independently of other countries that have sovereignty over their territory. That's why you're an independent and sovereign state. So only your laws apply. Colonization can only take place when you begin to impose your laws, not over another sovereign country, but over territory that is not a sovereign country yet, a non-state entity, right? So when the United States began to occupy the east coast of the United States today that we call the United States, and they created what is called the British colonies. They had to physically be there, plant the flag, and say, we are British subjects. We're occupying this as a colony, right? As time goes, the other countries would recognize that's a British colony. Below them was a Spanish colony in what is called Florida. Up north, you had French colonies in Ottawa, right? So you had Spanish colonies in South America, right? So that's how you colonize. And then later, these colonies became states of their own through revolution against their colonizer, right? You cannot colonize another country. You can't. You can occupy them, but now you're governed by the rules of occupation, not the rules of colonization, and then ultimately called decolonization. So it has been taught at the university, and it started in the 1980s, right? Haunani Trask was behind a lot of that. And I took classes from her when I returned from New Mexico military. She was in American Studies at that time, right? So I'm taking classes, and what was being taught was the American Indian movement, Black Panther movement, decolonization, indigenous peoples movement, not about Hawaiian Kingdom as an occupied state. Oh, I know that because I took classes. So when you create this idea that Hawaii has been colonized, then you're saying we're never a country. That's what you're saying. And I'm saying, no.
So is there an actual right or wrong? Like, this is the right thing to learn, this is the wrong thing to learn? Or are we just looking at two different perspectives and two different ideologies?
So actually, these are not perspectives. These are legal situations.
Okay.
And they're mutually exclusive.
Okay.
So you cannot be colonized, which can legally occur, but only on non-state territory. You cannot be colonized if you're a sovereign state, because that does not fit in that description, that legal description. So when countries were nations of people, right? Let's say in Algeria, right? You have a territory there that was a French colony. And Frantz Fanon, he was part of that revolution where they fought against the French colonizer, where Algeria became an independent state, and that was called decolonization. There's a legal manner on how that came about. It just didn't happen, right? Certain issues had to be resolved. The case of Palestine. Palestine is fighting to be a recognized independent state, but some countries are holding back. They're fighting for it. Now, when we start talking about Hawaii back then, that we're already an independent state, our own people start attacking it, because then they say, oh, you're acting like the colonizer, the United States. I'm like, what are you talking about? The fact is, Hawaii was an independent state. The United States overthrew its government, our government. That sovereignty is still intact. We're never colonized. And you cannot colonize an occupied state. It's in Army regulations. So it's really just, the problem here is University of Hawaii Hawaiian Studies program has been explaining a football game using baseball rules. All I brought into the situation is football rules. All of a sudden, it's making sense.
And it's hard for people to digest that and to agree with that, because they've been playing football using baseball rules all these years. So whenever they hear something that goes against what they believed for so long, they just cannot accept it. And then they start saying, oh, you're wrong, silly Sai, whatever it is, you know. You just, I mean, the timing of this podcast with like a recent post on social media is just, I don't know how that happened, but the timing was just so perfect that you're on the podcast today and the post was yesterday about, just because you just brought up about something that Haunani Kid Trask said, and just said what she said was politically incorrect, right? You're just you're just talking about.
Well, I explained what Haunani said. I didn't try to reinterpret what she said. What she said was within the context of being in the United States as a colonized people. It's in her book, right? So I didn't reinterpret or try to say something she didn't say or to give some misunderstanding as to why she said it. No, I'm saying this is what she said and this is what she was referring to. She would say Native Hawaiians, okay, are indigenous people that have been colonized by the United States, and we are not American. We're Hawaiian. She didn't say Hawaii is occupied and that we need to demand compliance to the law of occupation so we can end the occupation. No. I knew Haunani. That's not what she believed. It's in her books on being, native, something native story by native daughter, I think.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
A native, yeah.
Yeah, she's very explicit in there. And I took a quote out of her and I used it in one of my law journal articles published in the Hawaiian Journal of Law and Politics. And it was called Setting the Record Straight on Hawaiian Indigeneity. I'm calling it. And that was back in 2021. Yeah. And that created a firestorm up at the university because I'm calling them on it. And all I'm saying is the conclusions are wrong. So Lili Kala Kamele Hiva came out with the book Pehela Iponoi, Native Land and Foreign Desires, the story of the Mahele and how Native Hawaiians got screwed. Wrong. Research has already been done by a master's thesis titled The Empirical Strikes Back. Empirical is data, right? Everything that she concluded the Native Hawaiians didn't get is exactly what we got. Here's the evidence of it. But she didn't understand how land titles work. John Osorio, in his book, Dismembering Lahui, said the 1851 legislature was an extension of Haole takeover. And not only they took over our land through the Mahele, they took over our legislature, dismembering the Lahui. Everything he said that the legislature should have done, they did. He just didn't know where to look because he didn't understand how it worked. So what ends up happening is when you do research at the academic level, you have to be careful of not being biased. And you're trying to find information to confirm your own bias. Confirmation bias. Exactly. You're supposed to be objective as best as can and apply the appropriate theoretical framework with the methodology and footnotes and citations. That's how you defend your dissertation. You don't argue it, right? So here's what I see in the role I am at. I'm in a boxing ring, figuratively, because because I'm in the ring, I take cracks, right? Like attempted theft, racketeering, smear campaign. That's a crack. And sometimes when you're fighting, back then I would fight like this, right? With my chin in. Now I fight like this. Endless word. Footnotes, law. I call that lawfare. Yeah, I love it. That is the new boxing skill that I had to acquire, right? So in the ring, I'm there to fix the problem, and I'm here to engage anybody that wants to get engaged. I got no problem with that, right? It's not going to be physical. It's going to be brain to brain. James Kaulia said that in 1897 in a speech in Honolulu, telling people to join the struggle of anti-annexation, and we fight brain to brain. I believe in that. A lot of power there, right? So I'm only doing what our kupuna said, but I know how to take some cracks, and I can give some cracks. Brain to brain. Yeah, no, I love it. And I love that you brought up all these resources, because reading some of the comments from the post that I saw was like, oh, does he not know there's a bunch of books on this? And then the person who posted it said like, well, that would require reading, which is pretty rude. And it's like, sounds like you read all these books. So it's like... It was part of me preparing before you get in the ring. So when I get in the ring, I don't try to figure it out because I'm already going to get knocked out. You always walk in with a plan. And then when that plan doesn't work, you adjust. It's called tactical maneuvering, right? So in the Army, you have an objective, but when you hit the ground, you may engage something that you didn't anticipate, and you got to make a decision. And that's called a tactical decision. But your objective has to stay the same, but you adjust, right?
Mm-hmm.
So like when I was boxing, my trainer taught me how to fight southpaw. That's how you adjust.
Mm-hmm.
If the guy you're fighting is better than you, fighting right hand, right? So when I'm in the ring, figuratively, I see and I hear noises as opposed to substance. So what is noise? Noise comes from the crowd, not in the ring. Substance comes from the guy you with in the ring.
Oof, that's good.
Okay. So when you look at the crowd, if you're in the ring, you can't be bothered. So that noise, it's nothing.
And it's usually people who aren't in your position taking the cracks in the ring.
Exactly.
That's so good.
So I don't get bothered
Mm-hmm.
by people in the crowd because they're not in the ring.
Yeah, because they're probably like engineers, English teachers, whatever, telling a boxer how to punch.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So my focus though is my plan. And when I entered the ring, because I have that strategic plan of phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and the tactical decisions that go within that, and then bringing compliance to the law of occupation. So how do I? So I guess this is where my life hack comes into play. Right?
Well, I usually ask that. I usually ask that at the end.
Okay.
So if we could hold that off, but
let me hold that off because that is a technique I use.
Okay.
To deal with noise from the crowd.
Okay, perfect. So that's perfect because if people want to know what the life hack is, you got to stay tuned. You got to keep watching. You won't know until the end. But I do want to know. So who do you get pushback from, and who do you have support from?
When I'm in the ring, I get support from substance, right? And I can get opposition, but substance, which requires me to engage because you're in the ring. You took a swing at me, I got to return it. Proportionality, right? So an example of substance is this book. Okay. So Royal Commission of Inquiry, 2020. This is everything you want to know about Hawaii as an occupied state since the 19th century till today, and the plan on bringing compliance to the law of occupation, which will end it. This is substance, right? Nobody can refute it because I haven't seen it yet. So here's an example of another form of substance regarding this that supports it. 2 years ago, this is a book review published of the Polish Journal of Political Science by a faculty member, international law, from the University of Warsaw. Okay. She writes here, I'm going to read two paragraphs. Presented next is the genesis and history of the Commission's activity described by its aforementioned head, Dr. David Keanu Sai. He presents the Commission's activity in detail by reference to concrete examples, with this part going on to recreate the entire history of the Hawaiian-U.S. relations, beginning with the first attempt at territorial annexation. This thread of the story is supplemented with examples and source texts relating to the recognition of the Hawaiian Kingdom by certain countries, example, United Kingdom and France, and taken as evidence of international regard for the integrity of statehood. Particularly noteworthy here is the author's exceptionally scrupulous analysis of the history of Hawaii and its state sovereignty. No obvious flaws are to be found in the analysis presented. So by her writing this book review, she jumped into the boxing ring, but she's on my side. And then she finishes her final sentence, her final paragraph, and it's a raving review. And this person, this professor, was also a member of the Polish embassy in Geneva, Switzerland, United Nations. Okay. She writes, I regard this publication as an exceptionally valuable one that systematizes matters of legal status of the Hawaiian Kingdom, taking up the key issues surrounding the often ignored of a difficult historical context occurring between Hawaii and the United States. The issue at stake here has been regenerated synthetically on multiple levels with a penetrating analysis of the regulations and norms in international law applying to Hawaii, starting from occupied territory status and moving through to multi-dimensional issues relating to both war crimes and human rights violations. This is one of the few books, if not the only one, to describe its subject matter so comprehensively and completely. I therefore see this work as being of exceptional value and considerable scientific importance. It may serve not only as an academic source, but also a professional source of knowledge for both practicing lawyers and historians dealing with the matter at hand. The ambition of those who sought to take up this difficult topic can only be commended. The thing about a book review, the person who does a review of your book, a publication, academic standards, it's best they don't know who you are, so all they do is stick to the book. And a book review can make or break the book, right? But you need qualified people to do a book review on a particular topic that they know, right? You can't have somebody who's an expert on gaslighting to do a review of international law regarding Hawaii, right? So you have contributing authors in here. I'm the editor, and I also wrote a few of the chapters. The contributing authors are all European. Professor Federico Lenzerini, University of Siena. He's a professor of international law. He wrote a chapter in this book on human rights violations being committed in Hawaii and the right of self-determination of an occupied people, not a colonized people. Also, Professor William Shabas, renowned expert on international criminal law. He's from Middlesex University, London. United Nations and International Criminal Court recognizes him as a renowned expert. He wrote his chapter on war crimes being committed in Hawaii, one of them, usurpation of sovereignty, and what are the elements that have to be met for criminal prosecution. And then also Professor Matthew Craven from the University of London Law School, SOAS. And his chapter covers Hawaii as an independent state under international law. So that's who she was referring to. It wasn't just me, but it was a collection of authors that were exceptional, but we all had to be in our own different fields. So it's hard to get pushback from anybody when these things take place.
Well, pushback from people in the same, I guess, arena as you. No. Does it come from, for example, I guess, like, when I see these other sovereign groups, I'm just like, and I hear your stuff, I'm just like, why doesn't everybody just work together? Like, if we're all kind of wanting the same thing, we want Hawaii to be sovereign, right? Or Hawaii is still sovereign. We want to prove. But the goal is to have the occupation end. The goal is for Hawaii to stay sovereign. Why doesn't everybody work together? Why do I see posts from, like, I mean, I guess I'll say it, like Jamaica Osorio, because you know her dad, like, saying, like, kind of, I don't know, I don't like seeing Hawaiians fighting Hawaiians. Like, it saddens me, especially other Hawaiians trying to come at us when we're just, like, trying to spread information,
Well, it's noise. And when you're dealing with a situation of now going on at 131 years, that brainwashing has been set, right? You're dealing with the presumption that everybody's brainwashed. So how do you communicate with somebody on these very technical and legal issues who've been led to believe something that's not true? Because then you try to explain to them what you know is not true, and then they get defensive about it when the issue is just the way it is. And you're the victim of the war crime of denationalization. But the emotional side behind it has no play in the game I play, because the game I play it's real.
Yeah, it's not rhetoric.
It's not rhetoric. I mean, if I say something, I can be held accountable, which they tried, and they trumped up charges on a crime. That's real. Although it's illegal, but it's real, right? So you're either in the ring or you're outside. You're either on my side on the opposing side, and I got to hit you because you just hit me.
Mm-hmm.
But if you try to yell at me and scream at me in the stance, I don't care.
Mm-hmm.
You're not in the ring. Get in the ring.
Well, what about these people that think they are in the ring and they think that they are doing it? What they are doing is right and you are wrong.
Then it could boil down to, if they're doing something that they believe in, hey, I'm all there.
Because I think that's what it comes down to. They think what they are doing is right. But I think it's a little different because, I don't know, I don't want to make assumption, but it seems like everybody on both sides has their blinders on. They don't want to hear anything else. They have earplugs in. They don't want to see anything else that goes against their ideologies. It's like we're living in echo chambers, and wherever you're at, that's what you're going to believe. But if they hear something new, they're just like, nope, you're wrong.
Doesn't matter.
How do we, what is the solution to that?
Well, some of it might be psychological.
Yeah.
So they got to go through therapy, right? Some people call it the Stockholm syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Others call it the bearded wife syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
Those are real symptoms of mental issues, right? I'm not downplaying that, right? Cognitive dissonance is a real issue. Confirmation, but that's psychological. It has nothing to do with, it is what it is.
Yeah. It doesn't have anything to do with the facts written on paper.
Yeah. So I use this example, but how I can use it to my advantage though, right? So I remember I was in one of my classes and I said, okay. And during this class, maybe this must have been 15 years ago, there was a older woman, non-traditional student coming back to school, and she's taking my class. And as I'm going through this history and our syllabus and the reading material, I could see she's getting very uncomfortable. Oh yeah, it's like, because see, as a teacher, you can see everybody's reaction, but not everybody can see each other's reaction. So I can read body language. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm good at that. And I could see this auntie. It was like she had a blood vessel going boom, boom, right? Retired federal worker, right? Hawaiian Homes. Staunch supporter of the military. Her husband retired as a colonel. Okay, good, typical. As we go through class, it's building. So then I feel, okay, I got to release the pressure. I said, okay, everybody. Let me ask you this question. Do you think that people here who don't agree with what I'm saying has any skin in the game, meaning to influence? They go, yeah, because you got to try to convince them. I said, oh, well, let me ask you this. Let's say that auntie over here, she's on TV for 2 months on KITV News. And they interview her. And all she says is, Dr. Sai is wrong, right? We're not occupied. And this is America. Okay? And there are no war crimes being committed. And she convinces everybody in the state of Hawaii, Dr. Sai is wrong. Do you think that works for or against me? They went, of course it works against you, because now everybody's against you. Mm-hmm. Actually, it works for me. Because I showed you folks, I was in the Netherlands in the World Court. So that means I can have access to some international body. And I can say, let me play this video of auntie ranting on, saying she's an American. This is America. And I say, I got evidence here with the birth certificate. She's actually a Hawaiian subject. She's not American. And she was brainwashed into believing she's an American. This is the evidence of the war crime of denationalization right here on TV. And that's when everybody went. All of a sudden I saw auntie, her pressure went down. Mm-hmm. And she started going, oh. So, yeah, it doesn't matter what people think, especially if it comes from being brainwashed to begin with, you know. So if you bring 100,000 confused Hawaiians together, you know what you get? Compounded confusion. Why you bring them together?
Yeah.
What's the reason? Yeah.
I think what I noticed is that we're just all so confused.
Yeah.
Like, because this is all new information to us. so many of us that grew up in Hawaii, like we never knew about these things. We knew that if you knew that Hawaii was illegally overthrown, that's basically what you knew. You don't know the details, the intricacies, the nuances. We know some of these political figureheads like Konani K. Trask, Walter Riddy, some of the people like musicians in the Hawaiian sovereignty movement, Sunday Manoa, all these, like we know these stuff, but we don't know the depth of it all.
Yeah.
I just feel like if we worked together and we all like combined our powers, like I'm watching this anime called Naruto. I don't know if you ever heard of it, but you know, they all want peace, but there's always like these clashing shinobi clans, and like at the end of the series, they all come together to fight this bigger enemy. So shouldn't we all like come together, all these different villages come together and fight the bigger enemy, which is like the American government or the military?
No.
We shouldn't?
No.
Why is that?
Because we shouldn't be fighting the American government.
Or like whoever that enemy is. Who's the enemy?
Ignorance. I'm serious. That's our enemy. Ignorance.
You got me there.
You know, so that is what I focus on, not on persons or people or genders. It's ignorance.
Mm.
But Hawaii's still occupied, and I got to do what I got to do.
Yeah.
Now, how do I deal with ignorance? Get people to be better teachers. Those who are taking classes from us and getting teacher certificate, teach the right history. And don't wait until you come to take a graduate course with me teaching in the College of Eds. In 3 weeks, you realize you're teaching the wrong history. I wish I got you before you got the teacher certificate. So work harder. So instead of teaching the students, I got to teach the teachers for the teachers to teach the students. That is how things get fixed, because what happened in 1907, 1906 with that formal policy reflects the power of education. And what these insurgents did in 1906 with the American government backing, they weaponized it. Oh, they weaponized it. Within 3 generations, gone. To me, you got to respect that. That's like St. Louis running the option, right? We're playing defense. We keep losing against St. Louis. You can't badmouth them. You got to respect it, because that's the only way you're going to try to stop it, right? I respect how they weaponized education. I know what James Kaulia said, brain to brain. Warfare with education, law, which I call lawfare. I believe in that, because I saw what it can do within 3 generations. And I was that 3rd generation when it was wiped clean. I didn't know any of this in high school.
Yeah, and no one's to blame, because it's just this is the circumstances that was given to us.
The one to blame are those who implemented the policy in 1906, whoever they were.
Yeah,
right. Whoever they were, from lies to truth. No. What I'm bringing on is I'm going toe to toe with ignorance, but through not weaponizing education, utilizing it in the way it's supposed to be. Give every opportunity for people to respond. Dissertations, got to defend it.
Yeah.
Don't argue it.
Yeah, I would love to just like do some sort of panel with a bunch of people and like have people discuss all of this on a public forum, instead of like some people just throwing shade and talking about people instead of with people.
Well, that can go on for sure. You know, Kamako. This is what I do. Doesn't tell people to stop what they want to do. But I'm still in a position of, this is not just me educating in the university system.
Yeah.
This is me carrying out the strategic plan to bring compliance to the law of occupation so our people can be protected.
Yeah.
And the main thing that drives this, even the noise in the crowd, no matter how loud it is, the bantering, the irony is they still benefit from what we do.
Totally, yeah.
No, so here's the point. The laws of the occupied state. So the Council of Regency had to set in motion or grease the wheels for compliance. Because to administer the laws of 1893 will throw this place into economic chaos. So in 2014, the Council of Regency proclaimed, by proclamation, provisional laws. So all laws that have been illegally imposed here since far back as 1887, the Bayonet Constitution. But let's just use 1893. All laws today, state, federal, county, will continue to be the provisional laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom, so long as these laws do not run contrary to the letter, spirit, and intent of Hawaiian Kingdom law. Okay? And we actually came up with a formula on how to determine that. Okay? So that means the laws are still here. There's no chaos. But the laws of 1893 still apply, right? 3 laws that Native Hawaiians will greatly benefit from. In 1893, since 1859, the Hawaiian legislature has been allocating monies to Queen's Hospital as a quasi-public hospital for universal health care for all Native Hawaiians at no charge. That's the law. Okay. So that means once the military government is established, every Native Hawaiian, free health care.
I'm down for that.
Second law, Kuleana Act of 1850, not repealed, still existed in 1893. Any Native Hawaiian can acquire up to 50 acres of government land at 50 cents an acre. Inflation calculator, $20. That's a law today. Okay, so Native Hawaiian today, once the laws of the Hawaiian Kingdom begin to be administered, free healthcare, land. Cost of living, everything drops. Second, a law in the kingdom says the residents of subdivisions within an island like Ahupua'a and Ilikupono, they have exclusive fishing access from low water mark out to the first reef, or if no reef, like in Waimanalo, 1 mile. Exclusive. That means people from around the island cannot come into that area to do their own fishing. No, it's, you got to fish where you live, right? Oh, a lot of people, a lot of locals are taking their boats to Molokai and poaching over there. In fact, there was a case called the Molokai fisherman case. And there was some fighting going on. How's that? On the Hawaiian law, those Molokai fishermen were right. Now, the way in which they took that law into their own hands, that was a problem, right? But they were right. And then everyone has right to fish past the 1 mile mark out to 200 miles. Exclusive. That's called the exclusive economic zone. Foreign countries cannot fish within that 200-mile radius around the islands. Who in their right mind is not going to support that if you're a Native Hawaiian?
Sounds like a bill that somebody would try to put into office and then it gets denied.
Because it's an illegal system anyway. And here it is. It's a law. It's what's on the record. So by name calling and all that, and then when it happens, let's say Jamaica gets free healthcare. She didn't do anything to help with that, but she definitely benefited from it. So that's fine to me, because that's my kuleana. I'm not here to convince everybody, but I'm here to make right.
Yeah. Are we if we are we benefiting at all by being under American law?
No. Since Americans took over, we become statistics. Worse health. Why? We don't have health insurance. And by the time people get to the hospital, it's too late. We didn't have that in 1893. You know what we're dying from prior to 1893? Smallpox, measles. You know what we're dying from today? Diabetes.
My uncle that's why I was in Hilo for his funeral.
Bad health. We would have never gotten to that point with continued access to Queen's Hospital, because then you get education on preemptive care, not reactionary. Yeah, that's not our fault. But yet we became victimized by that. In fact, Queen's Hospital and the allocation of monies was determined by the Attorney General of the so-called Territory of Hawaii in 1908. It was race-based. And under American law, that's not allowed. From that point on, Native Hawaiians did not have access to Queen's Hospital. No insurance. Look at another statistic, suicides. 1893, we didn't have any of that stuff, right? Substance abuse, drug and alcohol. We didn't have that before America came. Highest incarceration in prison. Yeah, no, not back then. So when you compare the two, Hawaii has an post 1893, Hawaii pre 1893, night and day.
Mm-hmm.
And it has a direct nexus to losing control in their own home, in their own country. So that denationalization process was real, because what went on in the schools starting in 1906 was you had common schools, grades 1 through 8, and then you got high schools, right? If during the denationalization process, you were not a good American speaking good English, you weren't allowed to go to high school. You got to go work. If you're very dark, right? Dark, Hawaiian, you couldn't go to high school. Actually, there was an article written in the Harper's Weekly magazine, 1907. This reporter visited 3 schools, Kaiulani Public School, Kahumanu Public School, and Honolulu High School, before the name was changed later in 1907 to President William McKinley High School. In this article, the reporter is making the comment of how all the young students in the common schools represented all the different hues, the colors. Brown and yellow predominating, he said. Saw you brown and yellow. But in the high school, which was President William McKinley High School, but it was Honolulu High School at that time, it was clear the population is white. Mm-hmm. And you had a picture. That's what was going on in the early 1900s. So my papa, my dad's dad, he went to work after 8th grade. A lot of Hawaiian families, their grandparents started working 8th grade. They never got into college, high school, let alone college. Mm. That is a reality we got to deal with. And I'm not trying to blame anybody for anything. I'm just saying these are the statistics. And it shouldn't have been this way, because this is what we had and we still have, but under the laws of occupation now, and we can bring this occupation to an end. So we need qualified experts in this field to lay that path on how this happens. You don't get together to figure it out. Mm-hmm. No. And there's nothing to fight except ignorance.
Yeah. And I see a lot of that on social media. A lot of the comments I see, the pushback of against this, when I ask about like any benefits of being part of American law, like, oh, you're still driving American cars, you're still eating American food, using American healthcare. But I think that's more of a consequence than a choice, right?
Well, it's out of ignorance. They don't know what Hawaiian law actually has. And what we did have, and we still do.
Yeah, we always bring up how we had electricity before the White House, exactly. How we had the highest literacy rate in the world.
Exactly.
So I think, people don't really realize that, and until these, I guess, conversations come up, they don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the meanwhile, as people don't know and are beginning to learn, I still got to deal with the occupation.
I know.
And getting, the head of the National Guard to perform their duty. So it's an ongoing process in dealing with ignorance, and it's not going to change overnight. Mm-hmm. But if a military officer has a duty, because I know I have respect for the Army officers because I was in it. I was an Army officer, but I will hold you to task because I know you know, mm-hmm. and I know, right? And I even had a meeting with Darrell Wong, the former Adjutant General, and his senior non-commissioned officer, Chief Master Sergeant mm-hmm. Rob Lee. And this was after I did my presentation to the Maui County Council that started the ball rolling on the full court press.
Yeah.
General Wong admitted to me in that Zoom meeting, you're right, it is his duty. I said, yeah, sir, I'm not trying to tell him to do something he's not supposed to do. And then he also realized, when I was the Adjutant General, that was my duty as well. I said, no, it was. But the difference between you and General Hara, you didn't know. Hara does. That's the difference. So every Adjutant General, since its inception in 1893, is the provisional government that created the position of Adjutant General, right? They all had that duty to transform into a military government under the law of occupation and Army regulations. But Hara is the only one that he had to face the information, and his JAG could not refute it. Mm-hmm. So My job there is to make sure compliance is brought because our people need to be healed.
Mm-hmm.
Cost of living. Most Native Hawaiians, which are the majority of the national population of the Hawaiian Kingdom, majority of them in America. Yeah, last census report, majority of them are over there.
There are more Hawaiians living outside of Hawaii than there are here.
Cost of living. When they start to realize, I can get quarter acre for $5, free healthcare. I just got to buy a package home, maybe $100,000 with a contractor. All of a sudden I can afford. And that is a legal right. That is not a political push, right? It's not a policy. You have that, but you need a government to enforce that. That's why governments enforce international law, the law of occupation, and the laws of the occupied state. That's how it works. So my focus is government. So when we restored the government as a council of regency in 1997, we had to do it in order for our country, the Hawaiian Kingdom, to have a voice.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't have effectiveness because we're overthrown. But that voice can draw attention and draw the spotlight on our situation. So that book review from Poland is an indication of how far-reaching this information is getting around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And Poland knows what war crimes are because they were part of World War II.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did the Council of Regency come about? How was it created and what legitimized it?
Okay. So good question. And I cover that in the book.
Okay.
Right. So that's what that reviewer also read. So in the military, you have this doctrine that you're trained in called necessity, right? So the chain of command and the role of necessity, the doctrine of necessity. And necessity is also what they call the mother of all inventions, right? You got to get creative. So in the military, if the company commander or the battery commander, because I'm field artillery, the battery commander, the entire chain of command, okay, down to the XO, down to the different ranks, down to the senior non-commissioned officers, all you have now is just privates because the unit got hit with an artillery barrage. They're all dead, right? Army doctrine says that the most senior private has to assume the chain of command. And that person, although being a private, has to assume the chain of command and be the acting captain in order to maintain the command structure. When a properly commissioned officer comes there, then he goes back down being a private. Until then, it is his duty to assume the chain of command. Otherwise, he can be court-martialed. So that's necessity, right? Extraordinary situation to maintain the command structure. So with that same mentality I had, because I didn't have a poli-sci background at that time.
Mm-hmm.
All I had was my military experience and my training. We needed to find a way to access the government of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And the only thing that we have that shows the government of the Hawaiian Kingdom is the Constitution and its laws. And who are the executive officers? It's all in the Civil Code and the Constitution and statutory law. So we need to somehow find a way to get in to that system as the buck private to assume the chain of command of the general,
Mm-hmm.
but an acting general, right? So we became very creative. One thing we looked at, which I knew, was a statute was enacted in 1880 called the Co-Partnership Statute. That means from 1880 on, anybody doing business as a co-partnership had to file their articles of agreement with the Bureau of Conveyances, which was in the Ministry of the Interior Department. And the Minister of the Interior had to supervise the co-partnerships to make sure that they adhere to the statute. You know, somebody dies, you got to do this. If you have a name change, you got to do that. So it started in 1880. In the Bureau of Conveyances, if you look from 1880 until 1900, you can find examples of co-partnerships. We looked at it, went through a few, and went, we got it. We're going to create a co-partnership, and we're going to call it the Hawaiian Kingdom Trust Company. And it will adopt as its constitution and bylaws the Constitution of 1864 and all the laws lawfully enacted. And it would specifically serve in the place of the absentee government, very much up front. It's right there.
Mm-hmm.
So we're able to get it registered in the Bureau of Conveyances, right? Now we have a record under the co-partnership, even though nobody even knows about the co-partnership. We're following Hawaiian law, not American law. We're not filing it in the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. This is Bureau of Conveyances. That then gave us the ability to assume the chain of command. So from partners, we can assume the role of the registrar, that office, in their absence under Hawaiian law. From the registrar, we can assume the office of the Minister of the Interior, because although physically he's gone, the office is still there. Then we can assume the office of the cabinet in the absence of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of the Finance, and the Attorney General, because we're the Minister of Interior. Once we're at that level, we can assume the role in absence of these three as the Council of Regency under Article 33 of the Constitution. It says the cabinet will serve as a regency when the monarch passes away. That's how we got in, right? Since then, I was the regent, but I needed to fill those other three vacancies. So my cousin, Keanu Sai, she became Minister of Finance, acting Minister of Finance.
That's Ioana's mom.
Yes. And she's not an occupation dude, like Jamaica says. And then the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the acting Minister of Foreign Affairs, Peter Aloha Sai, her brother, mother cousin, stepped in. Who are you going to trust more than anybody in this situation? My cousins, because we know each other. And under Hawaiian law, Hawaii has history of cousins serving in governments together, right? Ali'i. And then we eventually appointed Gary Dubin as an attorney general, but he was an American. So he had to apply to be a denizen, a dual citizen. We granted it to him, which gave him the ability to be that position as acting attorney general. He was also in The Hague when we argued the case, right? And then I would say maybe 5 years ago, he resigned. And then he was replaced by Dexter Kayama, who is currently the attorney general.
Okay.
So there is no doubt who we are. And we're not asking people to believe. It's like the private who assumed the chain of command when his unit got taken out does not have to get the other unit to agree that he's the acting captain. No, he assumed the chain of command. Because if he did it wrong, he would be in trouble. So what we did, we had to be careful that we ourselves would not be committing treason. So the doctrine of necessity has actually grew in the legal framework on how private people outside of government can assume the role of a government official in the absence of them. And there was a case that occurred, a British colony in Africa. The governor general was killed when there was an uprising by the people who were colonized, right? And a British subject took the position and said, I'm serving in the absence of the governor general. I'm the acting governor general. When everything was settled, the violence, he's brought up on charges of treason, this British subject. His defense in the case was he had to do it. He had no other choice. The court agreed with him. It was a Commonwealth court, agreed with him. But they said we need to establish what is called the doctrine of necessity, not I had to do it. So one of the primary elements of the doctrine of necessity is for those who are assuming civilians a government position, they cannot take that position to increase their power. That's treason. Taking that position, you cannot violate the rights of the people in that area. You are there temporarily. If you stay within that framework, you're good. We understood that. That is how we did what we did. Always mindful, though, we cannot step outside of the boundaries because somebody who's making noise in the audience can actually have something against us, get in the ring and says, you just committed treason.
Yeah, so that's my next question that I'm thinking of. You know how there's like North Korea defectors and stuff? They escape, they're telling all the bad things about North Korea, whatever. Are you not afraid at all about being that, like, being viewed as that in the ways of like the American, hierarchy. Like they're going to be, look at this guy making a lot of noise about Hawaii, trying to prove that Hawaii's sovereign. You don't think they're going to try to come at you for anything? I mean, they already have.
No, they haven't.
So, but you're not worried about that at all.
Okay, so when we were in The Hague in the Netherlands, right, the case started. The United States acknowledged that the Hawaiian Kingdom still exists. How I know that? Because we were in negotiations with them through their embassy in The Hague. Mm-hmm. So they knew that the Permanent Court of Arbitration was about to create the arbitrational tribunal, because the case started in November of 1999, but the tribunal of 3 arbitrators was not established by the Permanent Court until June of 2000, right? Prior to that, the American Embassy, through the Permanent Court of Arbitration's Deputy Secretary General, Phyllis Hamilton, reached out to us, knew that was coming, couldn't deny the existence of the Hawaiian Kingdom under the rules of the Permanent Court, but asked permission if they could have access to our records and pleadings of the case. And we said, of course. So that agreement was brokered by the Permanent Court of Arbitration. The U.S. State Department knows full well who we are and what we are, right? Now, when we came home to begin to expose the occupation, and I became the existential threat to the minds of people, not to the reality of the law, right? Getting attacked all the time. None of the attacks has ever come from the federal government. Only here locally. Now, whether they're being manipulated by the feds, I don't know. Maybe CIA working, hey, could be. But the attacks are coming from people here. The people here who will benefit greatly by what we have done.
But they don't understand that they're going to benefit? Is that why?
Ignorance.
It's just ignorance. Or maybe they want to be the one that like...
I don't read people's minds.
It's so confusing to me when I see these people and people whom I respect, like Jamaica and these other sovereign movements. Like, why don't we just work together? Like, it doesn't connect in my brain how Hawaiians work together with Hawaiians.
No, but come on, there's nothing to work together on this issue because they don't have the qualification. Jamaica's educational background is in English. She's not political science. She has no idea of how law works. That's not her area. But the irony is she's hired as a professor in political science. Mm-hmm. She's teaching classes in political science, and she has no background in it. That is crazy, right? That's like me getting hired in the civil engineering department with a political science background, teaching civil engineering. I have no idea how civil engineering even works.
Yeah.
So we have to realize when people speak, are they credible in speaking?
Or they're just passionate.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And then to say we need to get together for what? To hug each other.
Maybe that's my Peace Corps side coming out. Everybody be happy, friends.
Well, people like back in high school, I remember a warm fuzzy. Everybody needs a warm fuzzy. Okay, let me give you a hug. Yeah. Hey, that's fine. But you know what? And you may not know it yet, but I'm in a state of war. We're occupied. Mm-hmm. And this is not where we go hug each other. Mm-hmm. I got to look at who's coming down, who's doing what. I got to be mindful of, I have to have 360 vision, right? But that's just my reality, because when you attack in a state of Hawaii, not the feds, when you attack, you only prove my point. I'm right. Because if it was frivolous, why are you attacking?
Yeah. Well, because they feel threatened.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. But they're only threatened because of their own thirst for their power. Mm-hmm. But that's not my problem.
Yeah. It seems like it's an ego thing a lot of times. Yeah. Okay, so there's a lot to digest. And this... I don't know if people notice, I never took a shishi break, and I don't have a drink in my hand. This is the first time I've ever done that, because I really want to absorb as much as we can since you're here. You got to fly all the way from Hilo just to be on here, so I appreciate that so much. What are some actionable steps for us that we can do if we want to support your movement and your belief? Like, what can we do to help?
Okay, so the only revolution I'm involved with is not a physical revolution, but a cerebral revolution. It's all in the head, right? So it's, first of all, getting information. That's the main thing. So I'd recommend go on Google and go to YouTube and put David Keanu Sai. You're going to see all kinds of videos put up. Now, I don't have a YouTube account, But people have videotaped me giving presentations. They've been putting it up, whether it's Kanai Okana from Kamehameha Schools, whether it's YouTube itself and others. I'm grateful for that. That would be the start on listening first.
Spreading the word.
Yeah, spreading and listening, right? Also, this book. Yeah. And I hope you're going to provide a link to the book because it's a PDF and it's a free book. And also provide the book review.
Okay.
That is the one-stop shop on everything. Now, if you want a much more historical review of Hawaii's history, then my book, Uamau, Sovereignty Endures, The Legal and Political History of the Hawaiian Kingdom. And that can be purchased from Pu'a Foundation online. So students who take my classes go order that. And it's only $35. So I made sure they keep it cheap. Just start immersing yourself in information and talking to family. The key is to normalize the information, not politicize it. Enough with that already. And ask the hard questions. And don't attack people and don't attack gender. Don't attack anything other than ignorance. That's what you attack.
Yeah, I love that.
But you find a way to attack it and you find a way to explain it where it doesn't feel like you pounded in somebody's head. Like, hey, uncle, you ever heard this? You gotta find a way to bring a conversation going. And you know who gets it the quickest? From the Native Hawaiian population especially, always happens. When they find out I'm a former Army officer and they're in the military. So when we talk, they get it. They see it.
Yeah.
It's the civilians that get out of hand. Because, they get emotional.
Yes, I think that's the thing is majority of the people, especially in this topic, they lead by emotion.
Yeah.
Not really, not the analytical side of the brain doesn't really, come out during those times.
Well, the sovereignty movement has used emotions to drive their rhetoric.
Yeah.
And every group has their version of it, even those against those groups. When you really look at it, it has nothing to do with anything. But that is, I would say, the source of the confusion that leads to people saying things that are not necessarily true, right? And it reveals the fact that the people who told them something didn't really know it. So instead of trying to attack the people that taught you something wrong, accept the fact it's okay. Go start learning something right.
Yeah. And I think this, a good thing to remember. So I don't know if you ever heard of the 4 Agreements. It's a book, a really good book. There's a book called the 5th Agreement. And the 5th Agreement is be skeptical, but listen. And I think that's something that we should all do, whether you believe it or not, whether, you're on this side or that side. Be skeptical, but listen and try to learn. Because the more information we have, then the more we can deduct, the more that we can put some reasoning behind it, and then we can choose. But don't just listen to one thing and be like, this is it, this is the silver bullet, everything else is wrong.
So what we call that in school, is encouraging students to be critical thinkers.
Yes, please be critical thinkers.
So critical thinkers are people who ask the right questions or hard questions, meaning they're seeking clarity. That's critical, which is good. Now, critical thinking is different from being a critic. See, a critic is a wise ass. That's all it is. It's noise. And by being a critic or a wise ass, you're saying nothing, right? You're just expressing your confusion and your frustration. Also brings into mind that it is better to be thought of as a fool than open your mouth and remove all doubt, right? Sometimes it's best keep your mouth shut. Hamau.
Yeah.
Inohi lalo. E ho'olohe. Ni now. Now you ask.
Yeah.
You don't sit there and just start going off the handle, because that is not how our kupuna were back then.
Yeah.
They weren't highly emotional, screaming and yelling. When Kamehameha says, drink the bitter waters, e inui kawai ava, there's no turning back. You think people were yelling and screaming? No, they knew exactly what they was doing. So we come from a history of warriors, not screamers, not yellers. Right?
Action, just not vala'au.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a story of Kahikili. So Kahahana, who was a king of Oahu, right? Kahikili wanted Oahu. And he told Kahana, I will recognize you as that king, but I want what is known today as Kualoa. And then Kahana's kahuna said, you can't agree to that because the mana comes to Kualoa because that's where the whales come in and that's where they get the ivory for the Niho Palau and all that stuff. Kahikili knew that, right? So he began to see that Kahana was kind of wavering. So what Kahikili did was he launched a psychological warfare where he got Kahana to kill his own kahuna. Yeah. Meaning he didn't send the troops in. He played mind games.
Yeah.
That's another way of fighting. And that was Kahikili, a real warrior.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to do things that are proportionate. And I learned it in the army. So if you have a fly on the wall, you don't need a howitzer to take it out. Because you just blew your wall away.
Yeah.
You just get a fly swatter.
One slipper.
That's all. Yeah. Don't make a big deal. It's called proportionality. That's part of the legal process as well as military. So there's a lot of these things that come into play that has informed me in how I approach things.
Yeah.
Because only I can answer for my actions. Not everybody else, but people will benefit from my actions, even the screamers.
This is so good. I just feel like I resonate a lot with what you're saying because of this podcast, because on this podcast, we promote critical thinking and different perspectives and learning and education. But the critics, very small minority, because we have a huge following and people love this. And I only hear positive things, which I'm super grateful for. But the critics on social media, they're very loud. And it's because we're critically thinking here. And I think, this is my own opinion, is that they can't handle hearing something that they don't believe in or something new to them because they don't want to critically think. And then it's usually name calling and stuff like that. It's nothing to do with the statistics, the facts. It's just name calling.
Yeah. So since you brought up Jamaica, I would never pretend to be a slam poet because I'm not.
Yeah. And she's great. So talented.
No,
I'm a big fan.
That's a Kuleana.
Yeah, I'm just putting that out there.
But I'm not going to start to attack her on slam poetry because I have an opinion. No, I'd have respect for her. That's her Kuleana. She made her place. What I say is, don't act like you're a political scientist or somebody with a legal background. Stay in your lane. That's the bottom line. So if everybody stays in their lane, hey, we're all good. Not that we got to come together. Yeah. Because you're going to have a major accident on the freeway. Everybody coming together. Everybody stay in your lanes. Because I got to stay in my lane. And we're answerable to ourselves in our lane. So just be careful how you cross over. Because if you eventually do, by mistake, get into the ring, I'll give you an opportunity to get out. Because if you take a swing at me, in my area, in my lane, I got to respond proportionately.
It is what it is. Yeah. I agree. Awesome. All right. So moving on from this, no shade to anybody. We're just speaking. How do you convince the non-believers that we're still sovereign and all other things that you believe in?
Well, first off, I don't seek to convince.
Okay.
My goal is to bring compliance. And that's not through convincing people, but showing people exactly what it is. But from a historical standpoint and from a person who teaches political science and history, it's my job to be able to present Hawaii's history in a way that is understandable, but also opening up for critical questions, right? So I want my students that took my class to take ownership in what they're learning. So that comprehensive aspect is what I'm seeking, not convincing them of something. So when you now know, it's like you want to share it, right? That's good. But it doesn't mean you have to go pound people's head on it.
Yeah, like force them. It's like Christianity.
Exactly.
You're not gonna, go knocking on.
Knocking on doors and you're hiding. You don't answer the door.
I'm the one. I open the doors for all the Jehovah's Witnesses. I was just talking to one couple the other day. Cool guys, one local guy. But yeah, I'm just.
I totally understand.
Side note, I'm so nice. I'm just like, my girlfriend's like, why? I even got a phone call mid-conversation, and I said, hey, I'll call you back. I had the perfect excuse, and I just didn't because... Yeah, anyways, sorry.
No, so it's enlightenment. So I'm not into convincing, but I am a proponent of restoring the national consciousness of our country, the Hawaiian Kingdom. That's what I work with. Now, what I also have to do is what I do as the head of a government of an occupied state. There are certain duties and responsibilities that we have to do. One of those duties and responsibilities is to protect the population from war crimes. I actually got an article published on that by an international law journal just in June of this year, just 2 months ago. And you should provide a link to that aspect, because as the Council of Regency, the government of an occupied state, even though we're occupied, we're still responsible for protecting the population from war crimes. And I show why we're responsible, not that we are picking the responsibility, I'm going to do it. No, we're supposed to do it. And if we don't, we can be held accountable. So that's why you have a collision of duties and responsibilities between us and those in the state of Hawaii, the National Guard Office, the Department of Defense. And when those duties conflict, our responsibility to hold you accountable for war crimes and get the evidence to make sure you get prosecuted down the road falls upon you. So you've maintained your ignorance or arrogance to your own peril. It's all you, bro.
Okay.
All you.
I just realized that I was so into this conversation. We have a bunch of questions from our social media fans. So let's actually take a quick shishi break. This is the record, so I hope everybody's proud of me. The longest I went talking without taking a shishi break. So I will take one and I'll be right back. What if we told you the next 3 times you fill your tank, you could save money? Well, at Texaco in Hawaii, it's true. You can get $1 off per gallon on your next 3 visits when you download the Texaco app and join Texaco Rewards. Earn points on every fuel transaction and qualifying in-store purchases at participating Texaco stations. Download the app and join to get started today. Visit TexacoHawaii.com for details. We're back from a quick shishi break, and as you can tell, this is just a straight continuation from the first time Dr. Keanu Sai was here on the podcast. So let's get right into the social media fan questions, because now everybody has an episode that they watch, and now they have a lot of questions. So here we go. This first question comes, sorry, I think I got something in my mouth. Oh yeah, there you go. This first question comes from Elijah Sky. Shout out to Elijah, my friend. He says, was there a time in Hawaiian history where the Hawaiian people worship God?
Singular?
Yes, singular. I guess one true God kind of thing in Christianity.
Well, I've heard stories that's how it was long time ago, before the migrations came from Central Polynesia. There's no way to verify that. But there is clear evidence that there are many gods that our kupuna worship, right? And that was part of the Hawaiian society. That was the fabric, right? Now, when we became Christian, that was a byproduct of Kamehameha joining the British Empire as a British protectorate. And he knew that he could not continue to have a luakini doing sacrifices, human sacrifices, right? That's not Protestant. that was a British religion, right? So he knew he had to set in motion the ability to bring in British missionaries, because he even actually asked Captain Vancouver, requested him for Vancouver to send British missionaries. Okay, that's clearly on the record. Right. So he was anticipating changing the religion to one God as opposed to multi-gods. So he set in motion before he died that the kapu will not be reinstated. So under the Hawaiian religion, when the king dies, the kapu is lifted. Everything is noa, free. So women who could not eat pork, bananas, could eat it, right? And then the successor to the throne, he would declare the kapu has now been reinstated. So that's when men and women would eat together. That's part of the noa. Once the kapu was laid back, then you got to separate. Now you got the two houses, the eating houses.
Mm-hmm.
Women cannot eat pork, all that. So in order to set things in motion, he ensured that Kahumanu would become the prime minister after he dies. So she would replace Kalani Moku, who was his former prime minister, because Kahumanu would be the one to enforce the law. And she would be called the premier, the prime minister, right? And she had the connections to the Maui line of chiefs. So she would be able, being the daughter of Ke'eaumoku, to do that. And back then, it was not an issue of gender, but of rank. Not because she was a woman. Oh, no. Kahumanu was just Kahumanu. It's like I refer to my cousin Kaui, not as a woman. No, that's Kaui. Right? I don't see a gender thing. It's just, yeah. So Kahumanu was that person. And when Kameme died in 1819, started that motion. So Kahumanu would then basically destroy the temples of the old religion, right? Clean house, okay? And Liholiho would eventually be a part of this because he's going to be the successor. And this time it's all Noah. It's still Noah. And during this time, he would sit together with his mom, Keopuolani, who had the status to make change. Because Kamehameha II, Liholiho, was not the successor because of Kamehameha I solely. It was because of the rank of Keopuolani. And Kamehameha knew that. He sought Keopuolani from Kahikili, right? For that purpose, to maintain his dynasty. Mm-hmm. Not all his wives and their descendants, no, these. So when they sat together and had a meal together, during the Noah time, people realized that the kapu is not going to get reinstated. So Samuel Kamakau, in his writings, explains that it's not that the religion was destroyed, it's just that it was never brought back from Noah. That is when began the process of Hawaii becoming a Christian nation under one God. Mm. But you cannot erase the memory of a people. And even the chiefs knew this. So although you have one God, you still know about Pele, mm-hmm. right? You mm-hmm. still know about, Hi'iaka. Mm-hmm. You still know about Kamapua'a. So it's like the Hawaiian religion of Christianity included the ancient religion. You just don't erase that. Mm-hmm. That's how it was.
Just mutually exclusive.
They weren't mutually exclusive.
Oh, they're not.
No, they actually was incorporated because that is how you bring things in. I don't believe this anymore. Give me a break. 1,000 years of knowing this? No, you just readjust it. So you see Kamakau referring to the Luakini in his writings as merely replacing Kukailimoku with Jehovah. That's how he writes it.
Oh, okay, I see.
So it's called appropriation.
Yeah.
Not erasing.
I've always seen it because I learned about this in school. I've always looked at it as more like Greek mythology, which is the Hawaiian mythology, all these guys. I don't necessarily believe it because I grew up Christian and, going New Hope, all that stuff. So I love the stories and all of it, but it's not like I worship it. That makes sense.
So a good example would be the example in Louisiana.
Okay.
Okay, so when the French were there, that was a French colony, right? And they're imposing French religion. But the native people there, and also the Africans that they were bringing in, they're incorporating the Catholic religion with their religion, coming out with something like voodoo, right? So it's really an appropriation of religion because it needs to be taken as ownership. and not that somebody's imposing it on you. So even though you have a French Catholic priest preaching to you and forcing it on you, the only way that person is going to receive it is how he can receive it. And he's got to make some adjustments. But you're telling him to wipe clean? No. So to me, that is the power of a people in their belief. Now, one thing also interesting is 1851, the Supreme Court Justice, William Lee, has to make annual reports to the legislature. They wouldn't meet every 2 years until after 1864, but prior to that, every year. So they got to give a report, prosecutions, decisions, all of that. And William Lee makes a point and he pounds it in. He says that there has been an increase of prosecution by the police, by the district courts, okay, they're run by chiefs, for idolatry.
What is that? Idolatry?
Worshipping idols.
Oh, okay.
The old religion. He says this cannot continue to take place because there is no statute that prohibits idolatry. And freedom of religion is accepted in this country, no matter what religion it is. What that represents, though, the Hawaiian religion was running live and well. And here's a Chief Justice telling justices who are Hawaiian, but chiefs are saying, hey, these guys they're doing the old religion that we used to have. And he's scolding them. Stop it. Put convictions on what is provided by statute, not your belief. So that gives the indication that the Hawaiian religion was not erased.
It's just transformed. Or like you said, appropriated.
Or maybe these people were just saying, I don't care about the religion, and I'm a makainana, and I want to make sure that I can getting fish. I want to keep, worshiping the fish god. And then one chief says, hey, you're not supposed to do that. That's old religion. And then they take him to court. He gets prosecuted and convicted by the judge, who's a chief. And then the chief is told, religious tolerance. It's okay for them to do that religion. So that takes the whole idea that the missionaries came in and wiped everybody clean. No. Crazy.
Yeah. Oh, well, super interesting. Mahalo for sharing that. And good question. This next one comes from cc.tag. This person says, no questions. All praise and thank you to this Hawaiian patriot. That's what this person says.
Oh, mahalo.
The next actual question comes from Finn_Catcher. This person says, what should happen to the military presence on the islands?
Okay, so as I explained earlier, the state of Hawaii, its governmental infrastructure and institutions was from the kingdom era, the legislative, executive, and judicial branches. Within the executive branch in the kingdom, you had an army, and they were called the King's Guard. And to supplement that army, everyone between the ages of I believe, 20 and 40 can be called up as a militia to reinforce. So we had an army, right? And we also had a navy, okay? Now, when the country's government got overthrown and taken over by the insurgents with U.S. Marines protecting them, first thing they changed was the name of the King's Guard, which was active duty. Changed the name of the King's Guard to the National Guard. That happened in 1893.
Oh, so that's why it's called the Hawaii National Guard.
Exactly.
Yeah, interesting.
So the institutions were just adjusted. It's like somebody hijacked our plane and just painted it differently. But yet, this is an Airbus, Hawaiian Kingdom, and the United States is a Boeing. They look different. But even though they're painted like it's American Airlines, right? No, it's just still Hawaiian Airlines, which is painted. And that engine here is an Airbus, not a Boeing. It's a Hawaiian. It's not American. So when the occupation will eventually come to an end, the National Guard today, and that's part of the transition, will be renamed back to the King's Guard.
That sounds way cooler than National Guard, to be honest. It sounds like Game of Thrones. Yeah. Yeah, the I think King's Guard or King's Hand of the King or something like. They have those titles. Yeah. Okay, and that was from my old friend Wes that used to live here, who was in the Coast Guard over here. So shout out to him. Okay, next question comes from biz_kits. This person says, how can Haole kids, now adults, who grew up in Hawaii reconcile with not being Kanaka Maoli and still calling Hawaii home? We recognize the harm of colonization, but still have love and affection for the Aina and the culture as if it was our own.
So Americans today that found themselves in Hawaii is a product of a war crime called unlawful migration. So when one country migrates their citizens to the territory of an occupied state, that's a war crime. That's what Germany was doing in Poland, right? That's what the Israelis are doing in Palestinian territory with the West Bank and Gaza. It's illegal, right? It's illegal. But in line with everybody being taught that Hawaii is a part of the United States, nobody understood it that way in how a law would look at it. So my great-grandfather, Charles Armistead Reeves from Tennessee, Sparta, Tennessee, he migrated to Hawaii from the United States after 1893. So I think he came in 1899. He believed Hawaii was a part of the United States, and he married my great-grandmother. She was Native Hawaiian. And from there came my papa, Henry Keanu Reeves, and Keanu Reeves' papa, Uncle Sam Reeves, right? But as more Americans began to arrive here, it was because they thought that Hawaii was the 50th state. They moved to retire, but it's still illegal, right? It's still illegal.
But it was done under ignorance.
Yeah, so there's no, nobody can be held liable.
We're not
for
blaming
war crime.
anybody for anything.
But it is a war crime. And the war crime is not coming here. It's the one directing you to come here, right? So that is something that has to be addressed. I'll give you an example of how big the population exploded. So according to the 1890 census in the kingdom, American citizens numbered 1,900 out of a population of 89,000. That's less than 2% of the entire population. By 1950, according to the U.S. Census, it exploded to 500,000. That included my great-grandfather. And it increased since then where we are today. That gives you an indication of how vast the problem is. But the law of occupation has a way to deal with that because we're not colonized, as your viewer said. No, we're occupied. Because if we're colonized, there would be no legal problem with migration. But because we're occupied, then it becomes a war crime. So those issues have to be worked out in order to bring a resolution. So I can't say exactly how it's going to work out, but see, that's what is a part of negotiating for the Treaty of Peace for ultimate transition. Yeah, so things have to be taken back to its status quo as it was before the invasion.
Okay. Yeah. So for this person asking the question, what can they do to reconcile with not being Kanaka Maoli and still calling Hawaii home? Is just learn about, acknowledge that you're living on occupied land.
The first step is to be educated on it, to learn about it, use the right terms, and being Kanaka Maoli or not doesn't matter. Because you had people that were not Kanaka Maoli, which is pure blood, and you had those that were Hapa, which is part, and you had those that were not either. So like Sanford Dole and the lead insurgent, he wasn't American. He was Hawaiian. He was a Hawaiian subject, right? That's who he was. So he's Haole. So it's not a matter of being Kanaka Maoli or anything, because Hawaiian subject is a nationality. It's citizenship. It's not based on race.
Yeah.
In the kingdom, there was no issue of ethnic separations. That is an American creation. And we got infected by that.
Last episode, we talked about, or we broke down Kanaka Maoli, how we've been using it wrong.
Right.
We've also been using Hapa wrong a lot. Well, I mean, I know that because it's Hawaiian, so I knew that it meant half. Right. But a lot of people...
Well, actually, Hapa is part, but Hapalua is half.
Oh, Hapalua. Hapakolu, Hapaha.
Yeah.
A fourth. Yeah. So Hapa just means part?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, so we have been using it right.
Part Kanaka.
Yeah, because I think I think most people use Hapa as like Hapa Haole, whatever, like half Hawaiian. I mean, half whatever, half Haole. something like that. That's what I hear, hapa haole, whatever. But I think people were using hapa as like part mix, like we're mix.
Sure.
We're hapa.
Right. Yeah. So I'm hapa Kanaka or hapa Aboriginal to use in English. I'm hapa English, hapa Scottish, hapa Irish.
Okay. So hapa lua would be like half this, half this. I'm half
Holu.
Japanese, half
Hapa
Norwegian.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we're that's more, when we say hapa, we're more using an umbrella term. We're not being specific. We're like hapa lua, hapa kolu, hapa ha.
Yes.
Like, yeah. Okay.
I think people just use it because they're hearing it.
Yeah. Well,
not that they comprehend.
I don't think they actually
means.
know what it means in Hawaiian.
Yeah.
They just think it's like, oh, hapa probably means mix.
Yeah.
But it means just part.
Yeah.
And then you can go deeper with the 1/4, 1/3, whatever.
Yeah.
Half,
So like in land titles.
Okay.
Because that's my other expertise. Land title. You see, train land title abstractors.
Okay. And allodial titles too?
Yeah. It just means fee simple.
Oh, okay.
That's all it means. Yeah. People think it means,
it's a cool word.
Yeah. Allodial is a Hawaiianization of the word fee simple.
Okay.
Right. So it's actually stated in the royal patents as kuleana nui makeano alodio. So makeano is that type of alodio, which is that type of that fee simple. Yeah. So kuleana nui is estate in fee simple. But what I was going to say is in the deeds themselves, you had the use of hapa that is used in there because under Hawaiian law, you had 3 vested rights in the lands: the king, the chiefs, the konehiki, and the people, the makainana. So that's why you see in the deeds reserving the rights of native tenants, because that's part of that right. So in the deeds, they will refer to the right of the chief or the people as being hapakolu, 1/3 of 3. So you see that a lot in the legal system of the Hawaiian Kingdom.
Okay.
And then in English, it says 1/3.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So next question comes from Anson_Pa'alani, I think, but there's a lot of numbers in that. So I think it's Anson Pa'alani. Sorry if I got that wrong. This person says, what processes do we need to undergo to change our political national status?
Well, there's nothing to change. So a national status is what you have already, right? You can change it if you want to change that status. So if people think they're American because they think this is America, under American law, that's not how you determine if you're an American, right? So in American law, you have to be born on U.S. soil to be natural born, right? So a Mexican family comes across the border, the child is given birth in El Paso, that child is an American by birth, American by parentage. That child didn't choose anything. That's just the byproduct of how the law works. Okay, and they call it jus soli, which is birth on the soil, and jus sanguinis, coming from the parents, dual citizen, right? The same thing in the kingdom. If you're born in the Hawaiian Kingdom, you're natural born, right? Natural born Hawaiian. So like Sanford Dole was born in the kingdom, but his parents were American. They were missionaries. They didn't change their status by being naturalized. So that means Sanford Dole was an American by birth, a Hawaiian by birth, American by parentage, dual citizen. But under American law, you can lose your citizenship if you take an allegiance to another government. Sanford Dole swore allegiance to the Hawaiian Kingdom as a lawyer. So that sealed him not just as a Hawaiian subject, but because of that, under American law, he's not American. Okay, so that's what happens now. Once a country is occupied, international law prevents the acquisition of the nationality of the occupied state by being born on its territory. Because remember the other law, the international law or the war crime that says you can't migrate your people into occupied territory? The intent of that was to migrate and for them to plant themselves in to become that. International law says no. The only way that you can acquire the nationality of the occupied state, and this is across all countries, this is international law, is by jus sanguinis, which is by parentage. So today, anybody who is a direct descendant of a Hawaiian subject who was a Hawaiian subject previous to the overthrow of the government in 1893, January 17, is a Hawaiian subject today by parentage. So for me, my Hawaiian subject status did not come from being born at Kapiolani Hospital, but because I'm a direct descendant of Hawaiian subjects, natives, Aboriginal Hawaiians. But I was also an American because my great-grandfather, Charles Reeves, came from Tennessee. So that nationality I acquired as well. But once I took the oath of allegiance to serve in the Council of Regency, I'm no longer American under American law. But I'm still Hawaiian.
What happens when you travel internationally? You have a passport?
So that's a good point. So during the Permanent Court of Arbitration proceedings, I brought that issue up because the hearings were scheduled for December of 2000. And I spoke to the legal counsel to the Permanent Court. And I said, how do we travel to The Hague from Honolulu and Hawaii being an occupied state? Do we travel on American passports? Well, we may not, but we're not American. And she goes, that is a good question. See, that's called critical thinking. I asked the right question. She said, I'll get back to you. So within a week, she contacted me back and she said, okay, because of Hawaii's situation as an occupied state, right? Travel on 2 passports. So when you enter Schiphol, which is the name of the airport in Amsterdam, right? Present 2 passports, Hawaiian Kingdom passport and the U.S. passport. And the Dutch customs will be apprised and forewarned. And that's what we did. And then when you travel throughout the Netherlands, only use your Hawaiian Kingdom passport. That's how we did it.
So and it works.
Yeah. Yeah. We actually came up with a Hawaiian Kingdom passport, and we also traveled on the American passport because we're occupied. Remember, they're the temporary government.
Yeah. So say, I don't know if you remember like Brittany Griner, the basketball player that went to the, I think it was Olympics many years ago, and she got stuck in Russia because she had like a vape on the airplane and she was in the jail for like so long.
Yep. Where that started.
She was tried with, she was protected under American laws. So if something like that happened to you, say you were Brittany Griner and you had the Hawaiian passport, would you have been tried under Hawaiian laws?
No, she wasn't tried under American law. She was tried under Russian law.
Oh, yeah, that's why she could stay. But
she could travel with her American passport.
Yeah.
Which merely was her international identity card. That's what a passport is.
Yeah. But would you, what protection would you have had if something like that happened and you would be protected under Hawaiian law?
Hawaiian law has no effect beyond the borders of the Hawaiian Kingdom, like American law has no effect beyond the borders of the United States.
Okay.
So you enter into the sovereignty of another country under their laws. Now, whether they have a treaty with one country that gives their citizens preferential treatment on whatever, then that would be something that a treaty would have to provide.
Okay, so it's more so preferential and treaties,
Yeah, because the international law operates between nations, and in order for one nation to accept something within its territory, you need its consent.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we travel to other places, it doesn't matter what nationality we have. We're always tried under there.
Well, depends on whether or not that country requires consent from them before you enter their borders. And that's called a visa. Right.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
so if you go to New Zealand or Australia, you have to go online and get a visa, a tourist visa,
work visa, whatever.
You get their consent. Now you come in, but you kind of stay there forever. Right. But not every country has visas.
Yeah.
So in the Hawaiian Kingdom, there was no visa law. It was just, you just had a passport, and with the passport, you can enter Hawaiian territory.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Very interesting. I didn't know all that stuff.
So, by the way, the Council of Regency has already set in motion passports.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
How does one get a passport?
So passports, we're actually working out now because it has to be scannable, right? Because now when you go into countries, there's certain not indicators, but signs or symbols, so it can be read.
Like a QR code kind of thing, but not a QR code, but like the same kind of...
Like ////.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And you probably see it on the American passport.
Yeah,
you see that, so that when you scan it, it reads it.
Okay.
Right? So we worked all that out. And I would say within probably the next month or so.
Oh, interesting.
We're going to start announcing people can apply for passports and get a passport. And the passports applications would need documentation. So if an Aboriginal Hawaiian or Native Hawaiian is applying, because if you're Native Hawaiian, you automatically a Hawaiian subject.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't come from another country. So all you would need to have is a certified copy of your birth certificate from Department of Health, because we have to use that institution. And it says Native Hawaiian on it or Hawaiian. And once you get that, that's evidence that you're a Hawaiian subject, Aboriginal. If you're not Aboriginal, like Sanford Dole, a descendant of Sanford Dole, right, who's still Caucasian, that person would have to show a certified copy of their birth certificate and also certified copies of the parents and grandparents going back to somebody in 1893 before January 17th to show that that person was a Hawaiian subject by being born on Hawaiian territory. So you can get that from a census report. Or if they were naturalized before 1893, then you get that record from the archives. So there is a form to follow, and then you can get a passport.
Cool. My passport actually just expired 2 months ago. So are you allowed to have a U.S. passport and a Hawaiian passport?
So that's a really good question, because when I was in the Netherlands at the Permanent Court of Arbitration, I went to the secretariat, the registrar, right? And I was talking to the the Deputy Secretary General on a matter. And I looked on a table next to her, I guess one of her colleagues had like 5 passports on the table. And I said, does that person have 5 passports? He goes, oh yeah. How can they? I didn't know. So she explained to me that so countries themselves, if they have a particular law that this is how you lose your nationality, like America says, if you take an oath of allegiance to another country, you lose it. That's an American law. You lose it. You cannot get a passport. A lot of countries don't have that rule. So like even in France, a French citizen who gets naturalized under American law, which is American law, gets naturalized to become an American, even though that American law says you gave up your former citizenship, France didn't agree with that. Mm-hmm. And France says you can still carry your French passport because that's French law. A passport is under the law of the country, not the other country that's issuing another passport. So she told me that this person was able to find her being a direct descendant of different countries in Europe. And she showed evidence, birth certificates, and she was able to get passports because there was no law in those countries that would terminate that person's citizenry, even though this person might even have an American passport, right? But the determining factor on voting is that it's where you're domiciled, where you reside. Mm-hmm. And that's the passport that would apply. So you cannot vote in all the countries you got a passport, except for where you live.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Since you brought up voting, do you vote?
It's an American law. It's illegal.
So you don't do any voting here?
I cannot, because then it's a contradiction.
Because
but it's also illegal.
Yeah.
Remember, American law is all illegal.
Yeah. Sorry, Uncle Kaloi, you're not going to get a vote from this guy.
I don't want to be the bearer of bad news. It is what it is. Okay. Right? But the key is how you fix the problem.
Yeah.
And not how you exacerbate it.
So if sovereignty was, not sovereignty, the Hawaiian government was restored, and like military government. Right. How would voting work? Like, would we go back to the monarchy or?
Okay, so during a military government, during occupation, there is no voting and there's no legislative body.
It's like a dictatorship?
Sort of. It's like the military governor has full control because they have to respond to things on the spot. Mm-hmm. And voting can only take place amongst the nationals of the country. So normal procedure during a military occupation, it's not a democratic process, it's military. Mm-hmm. But there are rules and regulations to curb conduct, to make sure that they follow certain rules. So the job of a military government is to temporarily administer the laws of the occupied state so the occupation comes to an end. Now, when that happens, it will, but when that happens, and there's a treaty of peace, then the government returns from a military government to a full Hawaiian Kingdom government. And the Council of Regency would be the head as it is today, right? But its job is to reconvene the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
They have to. That's what the Regency requires, the Article 33. But because we couldn't reconvene the Legislative Assembly for election, we had to do this by necessity. It's something very similar to what happened with the Belgian Council of Regency was formed when King Leopold was captured by the Nazis. Belgian law says that the legislature has to elect a regency, but prior to that, it says the cabinet ministers shall be the regency until that happens. So it's a two-step process.
Mm-hmm.
So ours is still a two-step process. So when the occupation ends, our job is to reconvene the Legislative Assembly according to Hawaiian Kingdom law. And we have to utilize Hawaiian Kingdom law to reconvene the legislature. So before you can reconvene the legislature, according to Hawaiian law, the Department of Education has to conduct a census. They need to find out where the Hawaiian subjects are living, to identify the gubernatorial districts and how many representatives can be had from each district, right? It's all in Hawaiian law. And then after the census is done, where you identify Hawaiian subjects from the alien population, then you have to register voters, right? So people got to register to vote. And that's the Minister of Finance job under Hawaiian law. And then when you have registered voters, then you convene the Legislative Assembly. So you have all these steps, but the laws that we follow for election are Hawaiian Kingdom laws. Mm-hmm. But we can't do that, reconvene the legislature during a time of occupation, because the entity in control of our government body, is the U.S. military. Mm-hmm. That's the regulations until they get out. So we need to get to the stage of where General MacArthur was in 1945. And then we will come to that point of elections, like General MacArthur ended occupation in 1952. So 7 years lasted over there. I'm not saying it's going to last 7 years here, but the job of the military government is to bring things back to its status quo, its institutions of the government, bring it back to what it was in 1893, because it's been messed with for the last 131 years. And we're not going to say, oh, you can leave. No, you're going to stay until you clean it up. You know, so it's like we gotta clean the luau that ended and get poi all over. It's dirty. Yeah. You know, people think the Americans. You know, so
much confusion.
Military government now comes down on a plan, and that's why we put together an operational plan on exactly how that takes place with essential and implied tasks. Very much comprehensive, but you need centralized government control to carry it out. You can't go out and try to get everybody to believe it. Yeah. No, it is what it is.
Cool. I know we don't really like to talk about hypotheticals, but something that I was talking about post your last episode with my siblings was like, it'd be cool if they had a TV show on certain things in history, like what if, sure, you know, the Hawaiian Kingdom was never overthrown? Yeah. What if Tupac was alive? You know, whatever, stuff like that. Yeah. But it would be really cool just to kind of think what it would be like. What do you think it would be like if we were never overthrown?
I'll be bold to say that Hawaii would probably become the headquarters for the United Nations, because Hawaii was neutral, neutral territory. United States is not a neutral state. But the other neutral state that houses the United Nations is Switzerland. They're still neutral, right? Geneva. So Hawaii was a neutral state, no different than Switzerland. So we would be that natural place of neutrality. That's what I think. Yeah.
Do you think all these hotels and high rises would still be here?
But if we're dealing with the aftermath of it, we got to figure that out. Yeah. There's no sense destroying them, but appropriating them.
Yeah. But do you think it would have, Waikiki would be what it is today?
No. So if you go back to understand what would we be, is to look at what were we. Because law of occupation always look backwards. It doesn't look forward, because you have to maintain the status quo of the institutions, the population, the territory. You can't mess with it. But that's exactly what happened here in 131 years. So it has to go back to that. So back in the kingdom, you had a statute, and they regulated tourism. We actually had tourism. Yeah, Thumbs Annual covers it. You know, the Hawaiian Almanac. And people from around the world came to Hawaii as tourists. It wasn't a major part of the economy. I mean, Hawaii's economy was self-sufficiency. It had crops. It had trade, all that stuff. But one thing that's interesting, and a friend of mine, Dr. Lawrence Gunscher, he's German, and he did his PhD on Hawaiian Kingdom foreign relations, and he has a book out, University of Hawaii Press, The Hawaiian Kingdom, A Power in the World, right? And it's a mind-blowing analysis of Hawaiian foreign policy, right? Like way up there. But he came across in a book written in German, in Germany. And this writer is explaining his time in Hawaii as a tourist. And he said from all the countries he visited as a tourist, Hawaii stood out with particular attention on their belief in healthcare. So every tourist that came in had to pay $2 to the customs that provided them access to Queen's Hospital if they should get sick. He said he's never visited a country where they were concerned for others coming in. Normally, it's healthcare for those people in it. But naturally, that would be a good policy because we would have to deal with you in our hospital in case you get smallpox, which could lead to decimate some of our population. So it's interesting when you start to look at Hawaii from that time and how others looked at it. They respected Hawaii. Mm-hmm. It was amazing.
I mean, that people loved Hawaii back then. They love it now. The military really loved Hawaii. That's why they came.
And they violated our neutrality. So now because of the American military presence, FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, 1990 came out with a brochure identifying risks to all the states. They identified in this pamphlet that Oahu, has 5 targets for nuclear strike. Yeah, that's part of the risk. Mm-hmm. So what did the military bring to Hawaii?
So we're actually more of a target being part of America.
Absolutely. Even FEMA admitted that in the brochure. And with 5 nuclear rounds hitting in the targets, that just took out Oahu.
Where would it hit? Pearl Harbor?
Yeah. Kaneohe. Schofield.
Also all the military bases.
Had the 5.
Okay.
It hit them.
What about this? Because you brought up tourism, and one of the comments I see all the time when these clips go out of our Hawaii demographic, oh, you guys wouldn't survive a day without tourism. You guys rely on tourism. You guys would be nothing without tourism. What do you have to say about that?
Well, the way the economy is set now under the American situation is that's true.
Mm-hmm. It's how they set it up so that we have to rely on tourism, right?
Exactly. And not only rely on tourism, but also rely on goods and services coming in. Mm-hmm. And that's the Jones Act, right? So 90% of goods are not coming from here. They're coming from America. So it creates a dependency. Whether by chance or design, I don't know. But that's illegal. That is a violation of the law of occupation because under Hawaiian Kingdom law, you need to look at how the economy was set back then, and that's how it's got to get back to. See, that's part of taking things back to the status quo. So all of a sudden, Thrum's Annual of 1890s, 1880s, the Hawaiian Almanac becomes point on, it explains and it gives statistics on the Hawaiian economy, agriculture. This was not dependency. The military government's job is to bring it back to that status quo. And the Jones Act wouldn't apply to us because that's an American law. So American law only allows American flagships to bring in goods to Hawaii. No, we got treaties with all these countries. That's an American law limited to U.S. territory. That means we can get goods coming directly to Hawaii, let's say from Japan, right? Instead of Japan passing us, going to the port of Los Angeles, offload, then Matson gets reloaded and it comes back here, right? That's the Jones Act. That doesn't apply. That's illegal. That's an American law. That means that Japanese tanker or ship, can come directly into Pearl Harbor, offload the goods here that was requested, and then continue to the port of Los Angeles.
Which would be cheaper for us, which would decrease the cost of living, but they don't do that because they have a monopoly, right?
So here's the effect that the Jones Act has on our economy. It's not the sole indicator, but it's one of them. So according to the Jones Act, it's actually there to protect the American flagships and the merchant marines, which are American. Okay, I'm there to protect them. So when foreign goods come, they have to go to designated ports like the Port of Los Angeles. They offload, and then they get reloaded with American ships that redistribute around the coast of the United States, or they get loaded on semis to take it, right? Now, to come to Hawaii will cost Matson more than if Matson went to San Diego from the Port of Los Angeles. Because to come here, you got to pay for more fuel. Mm-hmm. You got to pay for the manpower on there. You got to pay for their coverage of insurance and whatever, just part of having a business. And then what ends up happening is for Matson to increase those costs, they put it on the consumer when they pick up the goods. So they don't pay for it outright, but the ones who ask to get the Toyota truck, Tacoma, they got to pay the extra cost that it takes to get it here. Mm-hmm. When all they should have done is actually pay for what came directly from Japan. Mm-hmm. So you have these matters that have to be addressed by a military government to bring it back to the status quo, because that is what we call command decision-making, centralized control. And you need that in a time of 131 years of abuse. But everything is followed through law, procedure, and things that are transparent. Mm-hmm. This is not where this guy is a dictator. And the Council of Regency's job is to make sure that whoever that person is, because it ain't Hara anymore, but Logan or whoever in the chain of command, as that commanding officer, we will make sure they follow how these things work, and we'll hold them accountable.
Cool. So
we're in the front seat with them. Yeah. We're not driving. The law says you got to drive right now, but it's only temporary.
Yeah.
But I'm watching you.
Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Okay. Sorry, getting back to the questions from the same person, Anson. The part 2 of his question was, do we Kanaka Maoli / Kanaka Iwi need to go through a repatriation / expatriation process for status correction to be under the jurisdiction of the Hawaiian Kingdom government?
No. Okay. That is what sovereignty groups was promoting, and they were making it up. Some of them were saying you got to give up being an American, but using American law to give it up. Mm-hmm. Why do you have to give it up?
You could have both.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. It's not one or the other. It doesn't have to be. That's the thing I see with these things. They're always on the extremes,
right? One
or the other.
Yeah, it's like a binary approach.
Yeah.
If this, got to do that. Mm-hmm. No, if you understand what is nationality, you are who you are. Even if you have 5 different nationalities, you got 5 different passports, and one of them is Hawaiian. Fine, that's good. Yeah. But where you vote after the occupation ends will depend on what passport you have, where you live.
Yeah.
So if you live in the Hawaiian Kingdom, after the occupation ends, you can register to vote.
Yeah. I think you said it last episode, something, the difference between what you're doing there is a lot more exclusive. Or is that what you said? Something like that. I remember you mentioning something about...
Well, it's very... it's ethnocentric, meaning it's native-based.
Okay, maybe that's what it was.
Yeah, so... Yeah. And that stems from American law that has created Hawaiian homes. You got OHA. It's very ethnic, but it's all an American law creation. So the sovereignty groups that have said things without being accurate have drawn from that current understanding, and then they start to appropriate those with issues of international law, and it almost becomes like a form of pigeon talking. But it's all wrong.
Or the game telephone, where you say something and it goes to somebody else. By the time it gets to the last person, it's all jumbled.
Well, I actually did this in my class.
Really?
I said, okay, we line up. I had 10 of them, the students. I said, okay, we're going to see what happens with information.
Okay, yeah.
That's not written. So I whispered in the ear of the students softly. Then he whispers in the ear of somebody else. It goes down to 10 people. That 10 person said something that was completely different than what I said. How do you resolve that? You know what? Let me write it down. Now pass that down. It hasn't changed.
Yeah.
That's what a law is. This is not, I heard.
Yeah.
My auntie said, or I like to say this jokingly, my father's uncle's dog's friend's sister. I take it easy.
Yeah. Stop doing the uehe amir slide. Okay, awesome. Next question comes from Okay, VT. This person says, how can you work together with those in the sovereignty movement and the rest of the Lahui? We kind of talked about it a little bit, but if you want to add anything else.
There's nothing to work about.
It's just ignorance.
Yeah, I mean, just get educated.
Yeah.
And like I said, the Council of Regency has a function, has its job. It has a plan. It's been operating on that plan since 1997. It hasn't detoured. And we've accomplished so much. So why wouldn't get together with somebody or something? That's why maybe just take my class, register for class up at UH, or go watch the videos.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. And next question comes from Makani84. This person says, will Hawaiian citizenship be extended to locals who have been in Hawaii for multiple generations? Kind of already covered that as well.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yes.
Yeah. So you are who you were, not you are who you want to be.
Yeah.
Now, who you want to be is different from who you were. That's up to you. But you got to follow the rules of the country that has that nationality.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Last question comes from one of our Patreon supporters, Jordan H. He says, absolutely love the episode. He really knows his history and makes a compelling case based on international law rather than emotion. I'm Haole, but was born and raised in Hawaii, so this question is a lifelong one for me, managing that tension of belonging versus not belonging based on ethnicity rather than how I live and treat others. For Dr. Keanu Sai, what role do you envision for people who love and are committed to Hawaii but aren't Hawaiian? 2 parts, if you have time, as it applies to Hawaii in its current state and as it would apply to Hawaii as an independent/transitional government.
So under Hawaiian law, and the government is operating past occupation, ethnicity has nothing to do with anything. That is an American construct, right? So it's not even in the vocabulary. So it's not about being native Hawaiian. That is an American creation from Hawaiian homes, right? So during occupations, though, a nationality in the country post-occupation has to be in line with what was the institutional character of it prior to the overthrow and occupation. And that has to be worked out. So if you're looking at, legally speaking, straight up law, black and white, American citizens numbered 1,900, which is 2% of the entire population. Now, granted, you cannot go back to the number, but you can go back to the percentage, right? So that percentage of what that would be would include, first of all, the national population, and those would be Hawaiian subjects. So an indicator to come up with a number to that is looking at Native Hawaiians were 86% of the national population. So they were clearly the majority, 86%. 14% were non-Aboriginal Hawaiian subjects like Sanford Dole and Lauren Thurston, okay? So you can take that number total of Native Hawaiians, both in America and here, the total population, according to the U.S. Census report, and you come up with a number where you can create, in a sense, the 14%. So you would know that that's what the national population would look like. It has to be restored. Then when you look at the alien population, the non-Hawaiian subjects, and the percentages of each, you had British, you had French, you had German, American, South countries in South America. It's all in the census reports. You would have to go back to that. So basically what the law says is whatever the percentage of the population today, the entire population, they're only supposed to be 2% of Americans here. That's the law. Now, how you get to that point and whether or not it's workable or not, that's what the negotiation is all about in leading to the Treaty of Peace. So you're guided by what the law is, not what I want it to be. And if you want it to be something, that can happen till the occupation comes to an end because the legislature has to be reconvened to create a law. Right now, we can only operate on what laws exist.
Okay.
So it can get very very complicated. And that's why people involved with the work that I do, I work with people who are credible in different areas because I need to reach out to them. And let's say, hey, I need a white paper on this. Or, hey, can you give me a legal opinion on this topic? So I need to reach out to people, and they're not here because we don't have the experts here. So I work with people who are outside of the United States because that way I know it's objective. I don't get somebody from Washington, D.C. to draft a legal opinion on American citizenship and their residency in Hawaii. No, let me go get somebody from Britain or France or somebody else. Somebody that may not have an axe to grind also against the United States, because I need clear information to make decision-making that has severe consequences. So I'm careful not to say, oh, it will be this. I know what it's supposed to be, but we still got to get to that point, right? So many variables in the equation that we need truly qualified people to look into this. This is not a people power. This is not, hey, let's all get together and sing Kumbaya. No, this has ramifications. The economy, the rights of people called human rights, even those that came after the invasion, all of that comes into play. Dr. Willie Kauai, got his PhD in poli-sci. I was on his doctoral committee. His doctoral dissertation was on Hawaiian nationality. And he took it not only from the kingdom era and tracked its evolution and its impact by American law, but also, what do you do about it now? Right? And he asked those questions. And one thing that came up that wasn't there in 1893 under international law is called human rights. So people here that came here illegally, even though they didn't know it, they still have human rights. And you cannot expel anybody from a country based upon race, religion, color, or creed.
Okay.
That's a human rights that's settled. So again, that's another variable in the equation on how do we deal with untangling this net, right? This lay net. And it takes time, but I used to have to do that for my uncle, 1 inch eye, right? Or 2 inch eye, actually. And I remember right across the street, Uncle Charlie Boy, we would untangle the net. He puts it on the wall. And man, sometimes you tempt it, just cut it and tell Uncle, use the suji, just fix it. No, just keep going. And then once you keep going, I can tell you it's true, and others can relate who've done this. All of a sudden, once you get that one tangle, all of a sudden, it opens, with the limu and the rocks. That's how we have to approach this. Takes time. So that's why I have to be careful on not letting noise affect the substance of what we need to do.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. So the roles we play have nothing to do with race, gender, ethnicity. It's just we're all committed to, if you want to be committed to Hawaii, be committed to the cause.
Just be respectful of where you at and be committed to what is right.
Okay.
And keep learning.
Okay.
Not pick a side.
Awesome. I love that. All right. Well, mahalo, everybody, again, for the social media fan questions. Make sure you leave some for our next guest, and maybe your question will make it on the podcast. All right. Is there anything else you want to share that you think we should know, that maybe any updates that we should follow? Are there steps that we can take to learn more about this?
So I would recommend, as you already put on the last post, the last podcast, a link to
the Hawaiian Kingdom
blog, right? There's also another link that you should put up, hawaiiankingdom.org, and that's where the blog stems from.
Yeah. Can you send all those to me?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
All the ones you said earlier in the episode too.
Because I think especially for the Hawaiian Kingdom blog, I highly recommend it will prompt a subscriber request. Subscribe to it. Because then what happens when you subscribe, when something is posted, because it's always updated with information that is current, even like when the passports are coming out and this and that, it'll alert you that something got posted. That way you don't have to keep checking, right? Just make sure you subscribe.
Okay.
Would be important.
You might become the most popular guy without social media in Hawaii after these episodes. Just
No, okay, so I totally mahalo you and your viewers, because to get this word out, it's so important. But see, I'm not a social media kind of guy. I just got Gmail. And I'm so busy with other things. I remember I was told, hey, get a Facebook. So I told my son, Kiha, hey, this Facebook thing was just coming out and already had name recognition. As soon as he put it up, it started to light up with invitations to be a friend. I was like, whoa. I said, Kia, get me off now. So he took me off. I never visited again. Yeah. So I even asked my son, Kia, hey, Instagram, do I have to like respond or people or anything? Because, I can't see some of the stuff you're putting out. Oh, no, it's kind of tied to Facebook. I went, okay, I guess I'm not going to have it. I'll
just have people
see it
screenshot
on your mom's. I'll see it on your mom's phone because she got Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah.
Not that I have anything against social media. I think it's great.
Yeah.
So I'm really appreciative, Kamaka, that this worked out, because getting it out to your reach of viewers also hits another generation of our people, and that's important.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy. Mahalo for sharing. And we feel honored. Well, before we end the podcast, the time has come to share your life hack. So what is it? I know you brought something, right?
Already, that's the what I shared earlier, but yeah. Okay, well, I'll do it again. Okay, so I see the world through noise as opposed to substance. So like I shared, this is substance. It's not noise. So nobody yells about this. It's just there, right? And then the book review is substance, not noise. And they're on my side in the ring, right? So how do I discern between noise and substance right off the bat? I want to refer to an Olelo No'eo, a Hawaiian proverb that I firmly believe in, okay? Because it helps me discern between noise and substance. So it refers to the kahuiwai, the water gourd, right? So the water gourd looks like an ipu with a long neck, and it has a shell on it as a cork. So it would be filled with water, like a water canteen, taken on the Va'akaulua, up in the mountains. So the Olelo No'eo, with regard to this water gourd, is that the gourd represents a person. And water in the gourd represents knowledge. The gourd with a little bit of water makes the most noise when you shake it. So when I hear swishing, that's noise. I don't get worked up about it. But it is an indicator for me. I need to help that person fill the gourd with water. That's what I use as my technique to do what I got to do.
Yeah. So I guess the louder the noise becomes, the more water you got to fill it with.
Exactly.
And that is education, knowledge, ike, mana'o, all of it. And that's what you're doing.
Kawai ola.
Kawai ola. Nice. Okay, well, that's a great life hack. Mahalo for sharing that. I think that's all we got for you today. I've never, ever had a guest come back 3 times. I've never had a guest come back twice in a year, twice in a month. Breaking all the records here. But possibly we'll see how it goes. I have a lot of guests I got to get through, but maybe we'll have you back for a 3rd time. Maybe next year we'll see how the progress goes, and we'll just stay in touch and just continue to.
We'll see this thing about the military government. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, because what has been set already is a chain of events that would be 1 week at a time, where you either are a war criminal or you've established a military government. And it's going to keep going every week. And somebody in that chain of command is going to see the writing on the wall. And if they can't get a legal opinion from that attorney general, and for them not to be a war criminal like the one just before them, they got to perform their duty, establish a military government. So I think when it gets closer to that time, might be another time for me to come back. But we'll see.
So we'll stay in touch. Yeah, stay tuned. Okay, and everybody make sure you check out the links that will be inside of this episode in the description. Is there anything last words you want to say before we wrap up?
No, all good.
Okay, right on. Well, let's see if I can do it without reading my iPad. Mahalo again, Dr. Keanu Sai, for coming on the Keep It Aloha podcast. Spread love, be kind to one another, and mahalo for listening to us today. We have new episodes every Thursday, so make sure you follow us and leave a review. I'm your host, Kamaka. Remember to always keep it aloha.